Good morning, it's 7 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Sophie and Wilf today. Good morning from you as well. Let's get to it.
Conflict in the Middle East spreads to Lebanon. Israel exchanges fire with Hezbollah and tells people to evacuate.
3 US servicemen are killed in Kuwait. Donald Trump says the attacks will continue at full force and more US troops are likely to die.
The UK says the US can use British military bases. Hours later, a UK base in Cyprus is hit by a drone.
The government works to get tens of thousands of Brits out of the Middle East. We're going to hear from the Foreign Secretary.
And oil prices are up by 8% to $78 a barrel.
Hello, good morning. Well, we've heard the words unprecedented a lot over the last 48 hours, ever since Israel and the US launched a joint strike against Iran. Well, the Middle East is in crisis and people across the region are living in fear of where is going to be struck next.
Military bases and civilian sites have been targeted in retaliation in the UAE, Israel and Kuwait, amongst other places. The inevitable casualties on all sides have begun to rise. Our whole programme this morning will be devoted to the crisis. This is a fast-moving story and we'll bring you everything as it happens. We'll be stepping back as well and asking what might happen next.
Well, look, we've got our Middle East correspondent Alan Parsons in Jerusalem, we've got Sally Lockwood in Dubai for us, we've got David Blevins in DC, and we're also going to be hearing from our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes, so full coverage from us today.
But first, let's get you up to speed with the very latest as the conflict spilled into Lebanon, as we said, with Israel exchanging fire with Hezbollah.
So people in Beirut jolted awake by a series of loud explosions that shook buildings. Sky News understands there was no warning that the attacks were going to happen before the IDF launched 10 strikes on the capital's southern suburbs. Well, the military then issued evacuation orders for dozens of towns across Lebanon. And
as the strikes began, thousands of people were seen fleeing Beirut in their cars and on foot. A resident described the moment the attack began.
At first, there were 3 explosions. They were a bit far. We went up to the roof and saw that the explosions were behind us. We could only see the smoke. After about 10 minutes, there was another strike, right behind us. We all fled, and after another 10 minutes, there was the last strike. It was 3 consecutive strikes. We came here, and thank God we are OK now.
Well, those attacks in Lebanon follow Israel launching a fresh round of strikes on Tehran as well. We can bring you a roundup of the latest that's happened, because after those strikes, the US claimed to have sunk an Iranian Navy ship in Chabahar.
Iran's retaliation continued throughout the day. In central Israel, at least 9 people were killed and 28 injured in Beit Shemesh after a synagogue was hit.
Well, elsewhere, deaths were also reported in Kuwait, Abu Dhabi in the UAE, and Dubai was targeted once again. Meanwhile, the port of Dakwan was struck in Oman, and vessels also were hit in the Strait of Hormuz. Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan and Saudi Arabia were also hit. So far, though, no reports of significant damage.
Our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons has this first report.
The bombardments go on. In Tehran, the boom of destruction. American and Israeli forces renewing their assault. And it follows this. The Israeli military has now released fresh footage of the attack that blew up the compound of Ayatollah Khamenei, killing Iran's supreme leader. America continues to flex its formidable military might, even as news of US deaths emerge. But Iran has responded with both missiles and by declaring its determination to avenge its dead leader.
America and Israel should be aware that this attack will bring them nothing but shame. Our great nation, who are now mourning this great martyr, Khamenei, must foil the enemy's evil plans by being present in mosques and on the streets.
And this is what Iran's rage looks like. The town of Beit Shemesh, just a short drive from Jerusalem, was hit by a missile. The explosion flattened a school, a synagogue, homes and a bomb shelter where dozens had sought refuge. At least 9 are confirmed dead. Visiting the scene, one of the most prominent members of the Israeli cabinet.
What do these people ever do to them? What do these babies do to harm them? They've never done anything bad to Iran. We don't even share a border with Iran. It was for no reason at all, except pure hatred for the sake of hatred. So I'm asking all those who defend them in the world, who are you defending? Monsters.
The people we spoke to insisted this is simply a residential community with no targets of any military value. For many Israelis, the first day of this war was all about images of missiles being intercepted and bombing raids on Iran. But this is a very different scene. A school, a synagogue, homes demolished and people killed. This attack makes the war very real for every Israeli.
This is what it is. This is what it looks like. And just for reference, this is one missile that hit and affected so many buildings and so many lives. So think about the amount of missiles that were on the way from Iran towards Israel in the last 2 days. So the damage can be immense.
Iran has continued its attack on Gulf nations. Smoke rising in Sharjah and Dubai. This high-rise building in Bahrain struck by a suspected drone. Iran's plan is to embroil as many nations as possible. In Oman, smoke billowing from a port. Shipping seen as vulnerable here. And that means Iranian attacks on shipping passing the Strait of Hormuz. This whole region has been rendered unpredictable. In Iraq, not typically Iran's friend, a huge rally to honour Khamenei's memory, broken up as it closed in on the American embassy. The Middle East is rippling, changing and fighting before our eyes. A region etched by past conflict is now writing its future again. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Jerusalem.
We can go to Jerusalem and talk to Adam now. Adam, I was just really struck with how you ended that report when you were saying that this is a region writing its future again, as people kind of wake up here this Monday morning. What situation does the Middle East find itself in?
Well, the elements that have happened overnight is certainly yesterday evening a big barrage of missiles came over here. I think Jerusalem sort of rumbled to the most intense way that it has so far. So the Iranian assault then seemed like it was going to carry on through the night. Actually, it didn't. There were no sirens here in Jerusalem. What did happen overnight was this exchange of fire between Hezbollah and the Israeli military up on the northern border here in southern Lebanon. Now, that will surprise nobody, probably in either Israel or Lebanon. Hezbollah is a group that has been supported by Iran and said it was firing these rockets effectively to avenge the death of Ayatollah Khamenei. But what has then happened is that those rockets, to be absolutely frank, have not even caused a graze on Israeli society. But Israel has responded by firing missiles at a series of sites in Lebanon, including Beirut, killing a significant number of people. Israel had put a division, 91st Division, right up there on the border and had said very clearly, do not attack us, we will attack you back. Hezbollah did, and so this was wholly predictable. I think now it will be a question of Israel will also probably fortify its defences even more up in Lebanon. I think that they will continue attacking Lebanon and Hezbollah sites for the next couple of days. They've fortified the border up with Syria. Clearly, they are wary of any resurgence by Hamas, despite 2 years of bombarding Gaza and degrading Hamas in the Gaza Strip. So far, we haven't seen anything there at all. But as you've seen, Iran has also been attacking the Gulf. So the whole dynamic of the Middle East right now is effectively changing, and loyalties are being tested. Certain nations, the Saudi Arabians, for instance, haven't been involved in this at all. The Jordanians. if they were to be attacked, what would be the response? And I suspect that, as I said, right now we are looking at a region that is changing itself right before our eyes. The people here in Jerusalem will be looking up to the skies as they have for the first 2 days. There will be more alerts. There have been 2 already over the course of this morning since I got up. Interceptions, really quite big ones over in the sky there. And of course, what we don't know is the appetite for Israel and the United States for a prolonged conflict. They made it clear that what they wanted was regime change. Well, Khamenei has gone. So has a huge amount of the Iranian leadership. The question is, what comes next? Who will replace Khamenei at the top of Iran? Will it be something that is more pro-Western, something that the Americans would consider tolerable? Or is there another world where it becomes yet more authoritarian, yet more repressive? And nobody knows. And until that becomes clear, or if Iran asks for some kind of ceasefire, reopening of negotiations, however they couch that, you would have to imagine that A, this military onslaught will continue, and B, that the Iranians will try to embroil more and more countries into it.
Adam, great stuff. Thanks so much for that. As we mentioned, we'll be talking to Deborah Haynes for a perspective from here. We'll be talking to David Blevins in just a moment for the US perspective. But let's go next to Dubai, where Sally Lockwood stands by for us. Sally, have we continued to see explosions above Dubai, perhaps some breaking through and hitting targets there? And what does that say as well about Iran's response? Dubai, I guess, seemingly seen in the past as a more neutral place, and the fact that they are being targeted, what does that say about Iran's response, and how is it leading to changing opinion across the region towards Iran?
Yeah, good morning to you, Wilf, Sophie. Certainly, it's been absolutely shocking for people living here, and it appears to be causing a lot of damage when it comes to diplomatic relations between Gulf states and Tehran. Countries like the UAE, Qatar, Saudi, they have fairly decent relations diplomatically with Tehran in normal times. But certainly the UAE came out yesterday and said that Tehran has crossed a red line in the last 48 hours of attacks that have been carried out on Gulf states, including here in the UAE. It felt like we had a quieter night last night. I think many of us got a little more sleep than we had the night before, which was fraught with worry and full of loud explosions. Although I should say that we have had some activity here this morning already, lots of fast jet sightings in the sky above me, and also the sound of loud explosions. We've had a succession of around 6 loud bangs this morning, and a video is now circulating showing what looks like a hit, some sort of explosion in the northern Emirate, to a luxury hotel.
Sally, I think we just lost you a little bit, so just going to jump in to see if we can re-establish the connection to Sally. Just a little problem on the line there for us.
Sally is back. Sally, finish your thought.
Sophie.
OK, let's move on.
Hi to you both. I should say the internet...
working.
Oh, no.
You're back. Go for it. Finish the report, Sally.
Well, I should say this also speaks to what we're experiencing here in the UAE. The internet isn't as reliable as normal. It's in and out in some areas. Some people reporting that they've lost internet altogether. I was saying when we broke up that it appeared to be a quieter night, but there has been a lot of activity already this morning. The sound of explosions in the sky again, sightings of fast jets flying overhead, and a video now circulating of an explosion.
Yeah, well, as Sally was saying there, internet not as reliable as usual there in Dubai, but I think we've got the gist of what she was saying there, and I guess the anxiety for so many people in the region. Now, Donald Trump has promised to keep striking Iran until all objectives, in his words, have been achieved, despite offers of talks from Tehran itself. In a video posted on his social media site, he also acknowledged the first American lives lost. 3
U.S. military service members have been killed in action. As one nation, we grieve for the true American patriots who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation, even as we continue the righteous mission for which they gave their lives. We pray for the full recovery of the wounded and send our immense love and eternal gratitude to the families of the fallen. And sadly, there will likely be more. The entire military command is gone as well, and many of them want to surrender into saving their lives. They want immunity. They're calling by the thousands. Combat operations continue at this time in full force, and they will continue until all of our objectives are achieved. We have very strong objectives. They could have done something 2 weeks ago, but they just couldn't get there.
Well, let's talk now to our US correspondent, David Blevins, in Washington for us. David, so much rests on the president, right, and what he does in the coming days and weeks. He said that the US military will continue their attacks for several weeks. But do we have any more, I guess, clues about what he may have planned?
Well, that was the president's second address to the nation in the space of 48 hours. And I think he was really preparing the American people for two things. A, the possibility that this is going to take a while. You heard him say that combat operations would continue until they had achieved their objectives. Earlier, in a conversation with a reporter on the phone, he was predicting 4 weeks. And then B, for the possibility that more American lives will be lost. We know that 3 US personnel were killed and 5 others seriously injured in a strike on a base in Kuwait. And make no mistake about it, the arrival home of the first American flag-draped coffin is going to land with greater force than any Iranian missile, because it effectively redraws the political battlefield at home for Donald Trump. Remember, he was the president who mocked foreign wars, who was scathing of his predecessors for engaging in them, who vowed that no more American blood would be spilt in distant deserts. Now, he's clearly done a U-turn, and however it is justified strategically, he must know that that decision is going to be tested when the American people go to the polls in the midterm elections later this year. But if a long war was one fear for the White House, the loss of American lives another fear, the third was the risk of this spreading, and we're already beginning to see that from Hezbollah, a proxy of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard in Iran, in Lebanon. We could very likely see the same thing from Hamas, another proxy in Gaza. We're hearing of attacks all weekend in Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, from the United Arab Emirates. So clearly the whole geopolitical landscape of the Middle East is changing, and it has been changed by a decision made at the very last minute, we understand. Sources close to the CIA are now confirming that this joint combat operation was scheduled to begin in darkness. But because American and Israeli intelligence became aware that the Ayatollah and many of his closest advisors, 48 of them according to Donald Trump, were going to be in the same place at the same time, they made the decision to strike early during daylight. That's very, very unusual, but it is a last-minute decision that is going to have far-reaching and long-running ramifications.
David Blevins there for us from Washington. Well, we're now joined by the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Great to have you here with us this morning.
Good morning, Sophie.
Thank you for being with us. People are going to be going into this week feeling pretty anxious, particularly, of course, if you're one of the 94,000 Brits currently in the Gulf who's contacted the Foreign Office. So I thought that would be a good place to start. Are we drawing up plans to evacuate people?
Well, we are setting up the support systems because, as well as the 94,000 people who have been in touch when we set up the Register Your Presence system, there's an estimated 300,000 British citizens in Gulf countries that have now been targeted by Iran, including countries where now airspace is closed as a result of those attacks. That is, of course, extremely stressful for people who include holidaymakers and transit passengers at airports, people who have gone there for business trips, as well as those who live in the region as well. So we're saying to people the most important thing at the moment is to follow the local advice, which in most places is around sheltering in place. And we are sending out rapid deployment teams to the region to work with the travel industry, to work with local governments as well, to make sure that citizens can get support. Of course, we want people to get safely home as swiftly as possible.
Are we working on evacuation plans in the background? Is that something that is a contingency if needed?
We're working on every possible option. What we want, obviously, is for a resolution and for airspace to be reopened so people can get normal flights back again. But, of course, we are looking at a wide range of options, but working crucially with the travel industry and with governments in the region.
Including the evacuation if necessary?
We have to recognise the scale of this as well, and also the fact that there are strikes still underway, Iranian strikes on those Gulf countries, and Gulf countries who, frankly, were not involved in any strikes on Iran and who are now being targeted. And the most important thing, of course, is to follow safety advice in those countries. It is a fast-moving situation, and we are doing everything that we can.
I don't mean to hurry, there's just so much to information that people will want to know this morning. A British RAF base in Cyprus reportedly hit by a drone strike from Iran. Can you give us any more information on that? What happened?
You're right that this is an unmanned drone strike, specifically on the airport runway, and we're not able to provide further information and detail at this point. But obviously, all of the precautionary measures are being taken around the base.
Is the UK now a target for Iran?
So we've got 300,000 British citizens in countries that are already being targeted. We have seen strikes come extremely close to British personnel and to locations where British citizens are.
It's an important question to ask, though. Do you believe that the UK is now a target for Iran?
Well, we don't know the full details of this particular drone incident on Cyprus or the timings of it either. So I don't want to speculate specifically on that one. What I would say is we're already seeing our partners in the Gulf and locations where we have large numbers of British citizens and holidaymakers, tourists who are in the region, and they are facing now. Over the weekend, they've seen Iranians, we've seen hundreds of ballistic missiles and thousands of drones fired from Iran on those countries, and that's why this is significant.
Can I ask now about the UK government response? Because it's changed, right? So initially, Keir Starmer said that we are not involved in this at all. We refuse to request for the Americans to use our military bases to launch strikes on Iran. That's now changed because he says that he has now agreed to a US request to use military bases to strike Iran. Why has that position changed?
Well, this is about the defence of our partners in the Gulf and defence of countries where we have so many British citizens and interests in those countries. We continue to believe that we want to seek negotiated solution, a diplomatic process. That's always been our view, and it's one of the reasons why we made a deliberate decision not to be involved or provide support for the US strikes that took place over the weekend.
So it's now defensive. That's what you're saying. I just want to try and unpick what defensive means. So is any strike on Iran or its bases now seen as defensive because of what's happening, or is it only on specific intelligence that could impact the UK? What does defensive mean?
It's a specific limited agreement about the defence of Gulf countries, and many of those Gulf countries were not involved in any of the strikes on Iran. And so, for example, it doesn't mean political and economic and infrastructure targets, but there is a significant issue about ballistic missiles and launchers that are effectively pointed at the Gulf, pointed at our partner countries and countries where we have so many British citizens. So to not provide support, the support that the US have specifically asked for that defensive operation, I think would not be the right thing to do when we have so many British citizens there.
I'm just going to read you Zap Plansky's response to this, the leader of the Green Party. It took just one phone call from Donald Trump for Starmer to jump into yet another Middle East illegal war, failing to learn the lessons of the tragedies of Iraq, Libya and Syria. So just one phone call from Trump, and now the UK is just falling in with whatever America wants.
Well, that's simply not true. And there have been a series of discussions that we always have with the US, with other allies as well.
So it's been a couple of phone calls then, not just one?
We took a very specific decision not to provide support for strikes that were taking place over this weekend. We have been clear that we believe that there should be a diplomatic process, negotiations process. There is a major threat from Iran, not just to the region, but internationally.
But
there are attempts to provide to get nuclear operations and also ballistic missile threats,
this is kind of the
and
point,
also
right?
the brutal attack in the region.
If it was so important to not be involved in the strike that we decided to not use the bases, and now Iran has done what would be utterly predictable that it was going to do, and we've just changed our mind. I guess a lot of people will be worried about, you know, the West getting involved in another Middle East conflict, right? Particularly when there doesn't seem to be any plan for what happens when it comes to regime change, any long-term plan. You can understand people's concern, right?
And I think there'll be a lot of concern, including from those who are there in the region at the moment. So many of our partner countries, and I have spoken to foreign ministers across the Gulf, who were frankly shocked and horrified at the way their countries have been targeted by Iran over the weekend. And they have been appalled by the attacks that they have faced from Iran, and they are seeking support and defensive support as well. And that is why I think it's so important that we recognise the responsibilities that we have around defensive support for areas where we have our citizens.
Some in the Greens would say that this is not just defences, it will be seen as escalation, and it is us getting involved in another crisis in the Middle East where we don't know when it's going to end or what's going to happen afterwards.
So we continue to take the view that actually we need to pursue diplomatic processes, we need to pursue negotiated agreements. Of course, we do face an Iranian regime which has brutally killed tens of thousands of its own people simply for protesting on the streets, who have posed a persistent threat to us in the UK, backing attacks here on UK streets as well. So this is a deeply malign regime and has now posing direct threats in the region to our partners and to areas where British citizens are currently sheltering in place and sheltering in hotels. And that is why we are supporting this defensive action. It is limited. It is not involved. It simply involves the bases to be used by the US forces for those limited defensive action.
I know you've got a busy day today, but I've just got one question to squeeze in on domestic policy, if I may, because people granted asylum in the UK from today will have their refugee status reviewed every 30 months. Shabama Mahmood saying Labour MPs need to get behind the changes or risk a Nigel Farage government. I'm interested, I guess, in your view on it, because you, of course, were Home Secretary. You stopped short of doing this. Do you think it is the right policy?
Well, I think people want to see a system that is controlled and managed and is fair. The UK has always done its bit to provide sanctuary for those who have fled persecution alongside
on
other
this
countries.
Specific policy,
but this is specifically about saying it needs to be reviewed, because there are situations where things change in different countries and we provide sanctuary, but then may not be needed because situations change. And it's about making sure that there are proper reviews and that we have a system that is fair.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Yvette Cooper, their Foreign Secretary, with an update on the UK government's response to what we've seen.
We do have some live pictures there of Beit Shemesh, as we mentioned earlier, a site that has been hit in retaliation over the course of the last 24 hours. And we are able to now bring in Deborah Haynes, who's been standing by for us. Deborah, I guess worth picking up on some of the comments there from the Foreign Secretary. And I'm interested in your take on how it has all unfolded, that the UK has changed its position as to whether its bases can or can't be used, and the extent to which that may have damaged the relationship with the United States.
Yes, well, I've heard that from sources that there has been frustration on the US side about the British position in the run-up to the operation that Donald Trump launched over the weekend, that the UK was saying that they couldn't use British bases, including Diego Garcia in the Chagos Islands, for American jets to launch strikes. Clearly, it hasn't been an instrumental setback in terms of the American ability to project weapons onto Iran. However, like you say, it's it's definitely, I think, strained relations a bit. And now, of course, the UK position has evolved and it is allowing American planes to launch these strikes. And, you know, you heard the Foreign Secretary there trying to sort of make clear the definition between defensive strikes and offensive strikes, which does all sound pretty confusing to a layperson. Clearly, the distinction they're making is that they've told the Americans that they could use British bases to launch strikes into Iran that degrade Iran's ability to launch missiles and bombs against targets in the region. That's where this defensive side of things comes along. And clearly for the UK, it's becoming a really alarming problem. You've got, of course, 300,000 British citizens living or holidaying or working in the region that is currently under fire. And that's a nightmare for the Foreign Office in terms of its very, very limited capability now to be able to do anything meaningful to rescue those people, should that be the step that needs to be taken. And then, probably more alarmingly in terms of the immediate term, is the risk to British military assets in the region. We've seen that very vividly overnight. I understand that drone strike that we've been reporting about against RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus, it happened at about 10 o'clock last night. You heard from the Foreign Secretary there revealing new details about the strike, that it hit the runway, which is going to potentially be a problem, given that the runway is used to launch the fighter jets that are based in Akrotiri. And we've also learnt this morning from the Ministry of Defence that RAF families that are based at this site is a large military base. You have service personnel there and their families, because it's a Mediterranean island. It's a nice place to live. There are schools on that site. Those families now have been moved as a precautionary measure from RAF Akrotiri to alternative accommodation on Cyprus. And that underlines the real effect that this is having on British military personnel in the region. Yes, the Prime Minister has made it very clear and has gone to great lengths to talk about the upping of our defensive capabilities in Cyprus, also in Qatar. We've deployed F-35 jets to Cyprus, Typhoon jets to Qatar in the run-up to anticipated American military action against Iran. Those warplanes are flying in the skies and providing defensive capabilities, but they don't have the ability to shoot down ballistic missiles, and they are the biggest risk that Iran poses right now. Yes, we have ground-based counter-drone units also in operation, but our capability is very limited, and we really will be relying on the Americans when it comes to defending Cyprus, for example.
Deborah, great stuff as always. Thanks very much for that. Deborah Haynes, of course, and all of the rest of the live team you've heard from will be with us throughout the day here on Sky News. Sophie, also just wanted to give a snapshot of some of the financial market fallout, in particular, of course, oil prices, which are front and centre when we talk all about this. One might say, in fact, the initial reaction could have been more pronounced. So oil prices are up at about 9% higher this morning. We're missing a decimal place there, 8.44%. I think that's meant to say, not 8,000%. We're up about 9%. When futures markets for oil opened yesterday, it was about 12%. So we pared back some of that, and then in the last hour or two, it's picked up again. Of course, 8-9% on a single-day move for oil prices is massive, but we are talking about a major Middle East conflict. Just a snapshot how things could have been perhaps a little bit more pronounced. If we look at other asset classes, gold prices up about 3%. Safe haven trade, but again, could have been bigger, and equity prices down, but again, perhaps could have been down more. Japan down 1.5% or so. The FTSE 100 hasn't opened yet, but the future's pointing to about 1% or so decline. Again, you might have expected a bigger reaction. But that doesn't really tell the full story. If we look at a chart of oil prices so far this year, you'll see that year to date, since January, we're up about 26%. And a big part of that has been in anticipation of potential conflict in the Middle East. So today's 8-9% move in context to quite a big increase we've seen already so far this year. And so if you just point to it as well, last summer when we saw the bombing of Iran the first time round, we saw a big spike. And I think this is the big question now. We then saw a big fall. The question this time round is not just where oil prices get to, but how long they stay higher And that persistence of higher commodity prices is what's key for domestic inflation that so many people will care about. If it's a brief spike, it won't really filter through so much. Why are prices moving like this? Let's just look at a chart of Iran's overall oil output. On the left-hand side, relating to the blue bars, you see how many million barrels a day of oil they produce. 3.5 million barrels or so a day. And then the yellow line and the right-hand side, you see what percentage of global supply that is. Only 3 or 4%. Not that much in the grand scheme of things. By the way, of that, 95% goes east to Asia. But of course, oil prices, global commodity, if the price changes one place, it changes everywhere, so it still affects us. So why then are we seeing such a significant impact in oil prices if it's only 4% of global supply? For that, we come to the Strait of Hormuz. Everyone's heard that mentioned over the course of the last few days. Here, clearly a map of the south of Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, a very narrow strait, and only 4% of global oil supply for Iran, but about 15 to 20% of global oil supply has to pass through this Strait of Hormuz every single day. And if you cut that off, of course, in commercial ships have a much lower threshold for paying to continue to travel than military ships. If you cut that off for weeks as opposed to days, then we'll see the oil price go a lot higher. And I think that's the key question now, Sophie. It's not so much the scale of response, which is significant, it's how long it all lasts and how long the Strait of Hormuz is cutting off, 20% of the world's oil supply from getting where it needs to go.
Yeah, so that's the key thing, actually, isn't it? As you say, what happens with that strait and how far Iran decides to go with it. Let's look to the US next, because, of course, whatever Donald Trump does is absolutely critical to the months and even years ahead. He said last night that 48 leaders have been killed in the strikes on Iran. So we can have a look now at some of the key figures in the country.
Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was the supreme leader and its most powerful figure since 1989. Masoud Pezeshkian is the president. Ali Larijani was a senior advisor to Khamenei.
So let's look at the military now, because there's a lot of really important figures in the military, always incredibly important at these moments. The head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, General Mohammad Pakpour, Defence Minister General Aziz Nasir-Zadeh, and also the Army's Chief of Staff, Abdul Rahim Mousavi. Now, 4 of those 6 were killed in the strikes on Iran yesterday. So the Supreme Leader, the head of the Revolutionary Guard, the Defence Minister, and the Army Chief of Staff.
Well, with the Supreme Leader gone, a leadership council will temporarily run the country. It's made up of senior cleric Ayatollah Ali Reza Arafi, who's the head of Iran's Islamic seminaries, and the hardline Chief Justice Ayatollah Gholam Hossein Ajay, the reformist President Masoud Pezeshkian as well. So lots of questions about the ongoing leadership and, of course, lots of questions about exactly the state of the infrastructure beneath that. Let's talk about the significance of all of this and how it's going down in Iran. We're joined now by Sahar Sand, who you might remember has joined us throughout the last couple of months a few times. She's a British-Iranian investigative reporter and filmmaker. Very good morning to you. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm actually feeling much better than the previous times I was here because, like many other Iranians around the world, I too celebrated the death of a man that is responsible for so many decades of repression, killings, death. It was very emotional, very complex for myself and many Iranians. So I'm actually here smiling today.
Well, it's amazing to hear you say that so clearly. And do you think the majority of Iranians feel the same way? How is the nation divided on this particular issue?
Well, I mean, Iran is a huge country, 90 million people, but we can see how they feel by the way they reacted. Iran is currently being attacked. There are airstrikes by the world's biggest military, the US, the Israel. There is a full-on war going on. But when the report of Khamenei's killing came out, despite being advised and warned not to leave their houses, they went outside. They went outside dancing, celebrating. There were videos of mothers, parents, fathers holding the picture of their children who were killed in protests just last month, or many other protests that have been going on over the past few years, holding their pictures proudly, crying and dancing. There was a video of a mother saying, I had promised myself I would never dance again, I would never celebrate until this day came. The death of a dictator, the death of somebody many people blame for what's been going on in the country. There were DJs brought out on the streets of Karaj. There were women without headscarves dancing, which, by the way, is still illegal in Iran. So by this reaction, you can see what this means to so many Iranians. But let's make no mistake, even though we're all celebrating the death of Khamenei, a dictator, an authoritarian cleric who did so many bad things, his hands are covered in blood. This is not the end, because the Islamic Republic didn't start with him and it's not going to end with him.
Can I just say, it's really quite something to see you here and your kind of visceral, emotional reaction to what happened. It just comes across so much with what you're saying and how you're expressing that feeling. So it's so important to us to have you here in the studio today because of that. You talked there about what next. How concerned are you about what the next months and years have in store for Iran?
Look, like many other Iranians, I know what's in store, right? The bombs dropping on the streets of Iran, in Tehran, the capital in particular, my own family's there, the internet's been cut out. I don't know if my grandmother, if my aunts, if my uncles are alive. I don't know if they've been caught in the fire. I have no way of contacting them, to speaking with them. You know, there are so many people right now in Iran fearing exactly this, but on their own lives. We also know about the longer-term consequences. You know, look at the Gulf Wars. America going to countries, getting rid of the regimes and then abandoning them. Trump said, we've paved the way, now it's up to you. Yeah, the regime is still there. There would be no boots on the ground, and this war could go on for weeks. He has said so himself. And we know that that drains the country of its financial resources. It drains the country of its many other resources. Yes, Iranians are celebrating, most of them, I'm confident to say, because they believe it's a hit on the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people, and the targeted attacks have shown it. But the dangers of them dying, the dangers of the economy getting even worse is very much there. But, you know, as I said last time I was here, Iranians feel like they're drowning, and any hand is going to help them up. And this, for many people I've spoken to, inside the country in particular, has been many, many steps forward. But where it leads to, it's an anxiety that I share with my other fellow Iranians, and only time can tell.
I guess the follow-up question to that, I think you used that phrase, you know, extending a hand to help the people who are drowning. I mean, who knows where it goes and who knows what happens next? But do you think the Iranian people are grateful to President Trump this morning?
Yes, they are. I mean, make no mistake, no one thinks that Trump's priority is human rights in Iran. No one for a second thinks that Benjamin Netanyahu or Trump wants to save the people of Iran. But two things can be true at once. Whatever we know what Trump's priorities are. He wants to get rid of Iran's nuclear deal. He wants to leave a nice legacy. And this is very momentous, by the way. This could either make or break him within the presidential elections. It could really destroy his legacy or make it. But Iranians, most of them are immensely grateful. There are videos of Iranians saying thank you. They're chanting his names on the streets of Iran. I was talking to this protester inside Iran who has managed to get in touch with me through VPNs, through Starlink. It's really difficult to speak to them. I've been interviewing this young woman. She's in her early 20s. She's a university student. She's been going to a lot of protests. She's one of the people I've been talking to for years. And I asked her, I was like, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about what Trump has said in particular? Because I know that from previous wars, particularly the 12-day war last June, she was so against the war, she was so against Trump. I was like, has your opinion changed? Has anything changed for you? She said, well, I disagree with many things that Trump stands for. I disagree with many of his policies, with how he's with women, with the Epstein files. She mentioned this. This is like a young woman inside Iran. But she said, we are so grateful because he went somewhere that no other leader in the world would have. And he has come and given us the helping hand that we need. Because otherwise, we're not going to stop. We're not going to ever not want this regime because they're killing us. They've stolen our lives and futures away. But what Trump has done, at least for now, is to give Iranian people some hope. Where that leads, we're going to have to wait and see.
Sahazan, thanks as always for joining us. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Well, look, our next guest knows the reality of the current Iranian regime all too well.
Ali Safavi is a member of Iran's parliament in exile and has been involved with the country's politics for 5 decades and saw his older brother executed in 1981 for his opposition. He joins us now. Thanks so much for joining us on this. Can you just clarify for us what Iran's parliament in exile is?
First of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. Yes, indeed, the National Council of Resistance of Iran is a coalition of 460 Iranian opposition groups and personalities that was formed in 1981. Its president-elect is a woman, Mrs. Mariam Rajavi, who, by the way, lost one sister at the hands of the Shah's regime, one sister-in-law, and one brother-in-law at the hands of the current regime. And she has outlined a 10-point plan for the future of Iran, which basically guarantees gender equality, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, the abolition of the death penalty, autonomy for Iranian ethnic minorities, a non-nuclear Iran, an end to torture, and independent judiciary, a plan that many observers have called the Jeffersonian plan for the future of Iran. And on Saturday, the NCRI announced the formation of a provisional government, which will take over, and within 6 months, it will hold free and fair elections to elect a national legislative constituent assembly, which will draft the future constitution of the country. The NCRI, of course, has had tremendous support internationally, including bipartisan majorities in the House of Lords and, of course, in the Commons, as well as a majority in the United States House of Representatives, 4,000 parliamentarians, 137 former world leaders, and 80 Nobel laureates. So it's a well-recognized opposition that has been active for some 45 years. And of course, it has a major constituent, the Mujahideen Khalq, that has been active in Iran for 60 years, first in opposition to the Shah, and then in opposition to the current regime. And 100,000 of its members and sympathizers have been executed by this regime, including 30,000 in 1988, based on a fatwa by Khomeini.
I mean,
and interestingly,
it really just shows, I think, as you say, you know, the bravery, I guess, of people who have taken positions in opposing the regime over many, many years. I guess the question that so many people will be wanting to answer this morning is that there is obviously the celebration that we were talking about before, that the oppressive dictator, the leader of the regime, has gone. But is there, do you think, genuinely a hope that there could be a form of government coming through that could be good for the people of Iran, or is it just going to be more of the same?
Very good question. I believe after 120 years, since the turn of the 20th century, the Iranian people have fought and died under 4 dictatorships. Reza Shah, who was installed, unfortunately, by the British. Mohammad Reza Shah, who, after being ousted, was restored to the throne by a coup d'etat engineered by the CIA and MI6. And of course, then you had Khomeini, who hijacked a popular revolution in 1979 and turned it on its head. And then you had Khamenei. So I think after these experiences, the Iranian people are more than ever ready to bring about democratic change, have a democratic republic, and they paid a heavy price. I think what guarantees that Iran will not return to the dark days of the mullahs or the dark days of the Pahlavi dynasty is the presence of a very potent, structured, nationwide organization within Iran itself, the Mujahideen Khalq, who, as I said, have paid dearly in this struggle. They were very active during the January protest, as well as in 2022, 2019, and 2017. And of course, just this past Saturday, they targeted Khamenei's compound with 250
Ali.
fighters. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and forgive me for moving along. We have an action-packed show this morning, Ali. Sophy there. Now, a little bit of updating news coming out. We just had some updates coming from Kuwaiti foreign... sorry, let's bring this up. The Kuwaitis saying that an aircraft has been hit, but those on board had survived. And we'll bring you more on that when we have it. As you can see, Michael Clark is here with me, our defence and security analyst, to break down some of the latest assessments of this. Michael, just stepping back from it all, the action we saw 48 hours ago, what stands out to you as you've analysed it more, and the ability to take out the Ayatollah with no boots on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, we were speculating at the time when these attacks began on Saturday morning that the timing seems curious. And Sean Bell, you know, our other analyst, he and I were talking about this and saying that it was so late in the day, given that Tehran is 3.5 hours ahead of London, and we heard about it at 6 in the morning, so 9:30, 10 o'clock in Tehran. And we said that was not the ideal time to launch attacks of this sort. So they must have had eyes on a target and have gone for the target early. And that now seems to be, in the last 12 hours, seems to have been confirmed in the US, that Israeli intelligence got an idea that the Ayatollah and a lot of his staff were back in the compound, which is extraordinarily foolish of them, although the compound, it goes very deep. And they went back into the compound, I assume on the assumption that as the Americans hadn't attacked overnight, they were safe for at least another 24 hours. And the Israelis got wind of the target, said to the Americans, it seems, we want to go early. And the Americans said, OK, go. So the whole attack went in, it looks, maybe 24 hours earlier than they had planned, maybe even 48 hours earlier than they planned. But it shows the value of Israeli intelligence is very, very good. And they had 3 sites, it seems, that they had good information where people were, and they went for them. And as we saw from the pictures, they completely devastated the compound in which the Ayatollah was there, and they killed a lot of people in there.
What do you make of the breadth of the Iranian response, perhaps not the successful depth of it?
Breadth is clear. I mean, the Iranians have no choice in one sense. From a military point of view, they've got, I mean, some said they had about 2,000 missiles. I've seen some reports they have maybe up to 4,000 ballistic missiles. That might be a bit over the top, but they've certainly got some thousands of ballistic missiles. The military logic for them is to use them or lose them, because they know Israeli intelligence is very good and American intelligence is very good at watching what's going on. If they hold those missiles back for another 2 or 3 weeks, they might well lose them. So the tendency is to say, OK, we have been attacked in a total sense. The American president has said he's trying to destroy the government of Iran. That is war. If you're trying to destroy a foreign government, that's war. If you're trying to destroy people, that's genocide. But if you're trying to destroy a government, that's war. So they've declared war on us. We must use what we've got while we've still got it. And the Iranians have done what they said they would do, which is to attack bases. And they're going for anything they can find, which is American, Israeli or allied countries. And indeed, I mean, some of this stuff will affect civilians, because if you attack bases, some of your drones and missiles will be brought down and they're going to fall somewhere. So there's going to be some collateral damage and deaths through debris.
Talk to me about what resilience Iran has under the surface. How damaged will they be by so many of the key leadership members going versus having people to step into the fold?
Very good point. Politically, they've got a lot of resilience. So the leadership might have been rocked by this, undoubtedly. But Larijani, who is designated as the interim successor, Larijani has said, OK, we've got a council of 3 who are making decisions. And it will take a while for the Iranians to make clear decisions again. The fact that they attacked Duqm in Oman, they said, we didn't intend to do that because the Omanis are a friend. They've been negotiating, and Duqm is a port, very important container port, and they attacked it. And they said, well, that was kind of on autopilot. We didn't mean to do that. So there is a degree of chaos, you would imagine, at the top. But the top is still there. The Republican Guard are about 200 and 220,000 people, all armed and fairly dedicated. Below that, there's the Basij, who are the militia that go down to the lowest possible levels in Iranian society. These are the people who will come out on the streets and shoot anyone that they think looks like a demonstrator. There's about 600,000 of them. And then there's an army of about 800,000, something like that. Now, one of the key questions is, what will the army do? We know what the Republican Guard will do, and the Basij would want to do. They want to preserve their power and the influence. What does the army do? Will they sit on their hands? Will they go in with loyalty to the regime now that it's being attacked? Or would they, if demonstrators come out onto the streets, would the army try to defend the demonstrators? If that were the case, then we're looking at some sort of civil war. But in political terms, there is real depth in the Islamic Republic's control of society. So there is some depth there. Less economic depth. And the Americans are going for they've hit Kharg Island, for instance, they've hit Abadan, the transit points, but they're not hitting the energy production of Iran at the moment. That would be a really big step. If they went for Iran's energy production, then the Iranians, I think, would then try and hit lots of energy sources elsewhere in the region.
1 minute left, Michael. What about who Iran have targeted in response, and how does that change regional opinion of Iran?
It's changing it a bit. They've gone for all Gulf states, so they've hit, I think, seven sovereign countries now, one by mistake. I mean, they're a paper tiger in the sense that nothing they do does a whole lot of damage, but it's political expression. And any paper tiger can get lucky. So they're hoping to get lucky against the Americans or the Israelis. They are creating a sort of a front against them, but that's not the same as a front that fully agrees with what the United States and Israel are doing. So I think the Gulf states, I mean, and the Saudis are taking a big role now, saying to all their Gulf neighbours, even the UAE that haven't got along with for a long time, you know, we're looking after you. So the Saudis are trying to emerge here as a Gulf, they are a Gulf superpower, but a Gulf protector of the others. I think we'll see a different sort of Gulf arising out of this. But they don't want Iran to collapse. They don't want the chaos that will go with it. I mean, there's 5 million Pakistanis around the Gulf. And Pakistan, people have been killed in Karachi, in demonstrations in Karachi over what is happening in the Gulf.
Michael, pleasure as always.
Big regional implications.
Thanks so much. Good to see you, Michael Clark. Much more coverage after this short break when Mornings returns.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Good morning. It is 8 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilfred, very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
Conflict in the Middle East spreads to Lebanon. Israel exchanges fire with Hezbollah and tells people to evacuate.
3 US service members are killed in Kuwait. Donald Trump says attacks will continue at full force and more US troops are likely to die.
The UK says the US can use British military bases. Hours later, a UK base in Cyprus is hit by a drone.
We'll discuss the latest on the UK's involvement with the former UK ambassador to the US, Sir Peter Westmacott.
And oil prices surged to $78 a barrel.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the programme. Well, we've heard the word unprecedented a lot over the last 48 hours since Israel and the US launched a joint strike against Iran. The Middle East is in crisis and people across the region are living in fear of where might be struck next.
So military bases and also civilian sites have been targeted in retaliation in the UAE, in Israel and in Kuwait. And that means, tragically, casualties on all sides have begun to rise. Well, our whole programme this morning is going to be devoted to the crisis. It's a fast-moving story. We'll bring you all the developments as they happen, and we'll also try and step back a bit and ask the big question, what happens next?
Well, we've got full team coverage across the region. Our Middle East correspondent, Anna Parsons, in Jerusalem. Sally Lockwood is in Dubai for us. David Blevins is in Washington. And we'll also hear from our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, who's here in London for us. Let's go to Adam first in Jerusalem. Adam, bring us up to speed on the latest overnight, specifically with those developments between Israel and Lebanon.
Yeah, I suppose that is, in terms of the geopolitics, that's the standout one at the moment. So Lebanon is right up in the north of Israel, and Hezbollah, which is not the Lebanese government, but is a significant political military force, particularly in the south of Lebanon, and has had funding from Iran, has launched rockets into northern Israel. It says as an act of vengeance for the memory of Ayatollah, the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, who was killed, of course, on the first day of this war. Now, those rockets have not caused any damage at all in northern Israel. A couple of them landed in a field and were allowed to go off there. The others were intercepted. In fact, Israel, we understand, has used new technology called the Iron Beam, which is a laser beam intercept technology there in Lebanon. But what has happened is that Israel has responded with much, much more military might than Hezbollah showed, has attacked targets across Lebanon, particularly in the south, but also in Beirut. And we understand that 31 people have been killed. The Israelis are talking about maintaining that attack for the next couple of days. Israel knew, or was almost sure, that Hezbollah would attack. It had reinforced that border, put a division up there just a few days ago. And it's worth saying this is not something that's come out of the blue. There has been tit-for-tat attacks for a while. Of course, this follows on from a ceasefire after a war between Israel and Hezbollah. So that very uneasy peace has now broken, and Israel is launching those attacks. I think Israel sees this as an opportunity to try to absolutely degrade Hezbollah in the way that clearly it has degraded or has attempted to degrade Hamas in Gaza. So that's what's happening up there in Lebanon. The Americans and Israelis continue to attack Iran overnight. More huge attacks on Iran and indeed on the capital, Tehran. There were Iranian missiles coming back in this direction as well. Very big barrage overhead last night. And there were more waves came across this morning, but not actually for about 2.5 hours. So it has been peaceful here in that time, but of course that can change rapidly. Israel waking up today, having had a jolt yesterday when an Iranian missile got through its air defences and struck a town, a very large town, west of Jerusalem. a place called Beit Shemesh, which the missile hit an area. We were there yesterday, destroying homes, a school, a synagogue, and directly striking a bomb shelter in which it would appear 9 people were killed and many others were wounded. And for many Israelis, that is a horrendous wake-up call. It is, I think, easy for Israeli civilians to become a little complacent because their aerial defences, the Iron Dome, the other mechanisms, are so effective at blocking missiles. But as one military official said to me yesterday, nothing can be 100% effective. Missiles do get through. Also, so does the debris from those missiles. Some people were injured in the edge of Jerusalem yesterday when debris fell. We know that in Tel Aviv there have been more injuries. And I have to say, I think part of Iran's strategy is, and we've seen this, is not just to attack Israel. It is to try to embroil the wider region, to try to get the Gulf states, and Saleh Lockwood, who you'll be talking to, is of course witnessing this, to try to get those Gulf states to be part of this conflict.
Adam, we're just jumping in now to listen to a briefing from the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. This is a spokesperson.
Army. In the first wave, we immediately asked the Lebanese villagers to evacuate from there because there are Hezbollah bases, and this Lion's Roar campaign, we immediately backed up all our forces in the north because we took into account that the Hezbollah might open fire. This enabled us to shoot immediately, quickly. Our forces are deployed along the border, and we can continue with the defense and the offense whenever it is needed. We warned the Hezbollah what it would cost them if they attacked the state of Israel. If they stood alongside the Iranian regime, they made a very, very bad mistake. The IDF will react very swiftly, and they will pay a heavy price. I would like to speak to those in the residents of the north. We are, of course, beside you. And immediately we spoke to it was the Chief of General Staff who spoke to the forces in the north, and we explained that the Hezbollah would pay a very, very high price. The Hezbollah has chosen once again to sacrifice the people of Lebanon. We will continue deepen that very fundamental hit against the Iranian tyranny. We have started with another wave of attacks. We're talking about dozens of our combat airplanes who have been hitting out at the headquarters in Iran. Over these 2 days, we have hit out at some of their top brass, plus their infrastructure and wherever they have launch pads and have been shooting the missiles at us, together with very, very close collaboration with the United States. We'll continue to identify where the ballistic missile launch pads are and their caches of weapons are. We are continuing with all our forces. We're talking about air, sea, and ground forces if necessary. We are continuing defending and guarding the people of Israel. This is the 3rd day of this campaign. Please, I am asking you, continue conducting yourselves with this resilience, but adhering to the instructions of the Home Front Command. These save lives. And I would like to remind you that even if the threat is different, then the way we defend ourselves must be identical. Please ensure that you go into these safe areas, to the shelters. The safe and the shelters, when you go into it at the time of a warning, can save lives. Even at these moments, hundreds of air vehicles are actually fighting in Lebanon, in Iran, or wherever necessary. Anyone who pays they will pay. Anyone who attacks us, they will pay. I will continue being with you, and I will continue updating you if anything continues. Is IDF ready for a maneuver, a ground maneuver in Lebanon? Hezbollah opened fire at us last night. It knew exactly what it was doing. We warned them, and it will pay a very heavy price for that. We are very well prepared for it. We're talking about over 100,000 of reserves that we have actually recruited. We're talking about all our other ground forces and soldiers. We're talking not only on the offensive, but on the defense the whole time. And any possibilities are still on the table. From Haaretz, after Hezbollah has actually gone on, do you intend to evacuate the residents of the north? As I said, we were prepared for a multi-arena, multi-theater attack. And of course, we're stressing the northern border. And as I said, we have recruited over 100,000 reservists. And therefore, I would like to speak to the residents of the north. We're going to do everything possible that we can in order to defend and protect you, even if we need to actually carry out an offensive for your sakes. It was said that it will actually take 4 to 5 weeks, it was said in the States. Is that also your opinion? Well, as I said a few times, we have a number of objectives for this war that we defined very carefully, and we will continue to deepen them as time goes on. We will hit at that regime in Iran as much as possible. We started this offensive in order to remove the existential threat against us. In the previous war, we talk about the nuclear facilities, and what about the enrichment of uranium? Well, we have a number of objectives. We are working based on a very organized plan that we have set out. In the Rising Lion, we said it was the nuclear facility that we would hit at very severely. We will continue, of course, with all our objectives. We will continue deepen this assault against them. I'm not going to give any information out by answering fully that question to the enemy.
Israeli Defence Force spokesperson there giving a statement. Will, of course, bring you any updates on this extremely fast-moving story. But in the meantime, we can go to Dubai. We can talk to Sky's correspondent, Sally Lockwood, who's there for us. Sally, an awful lot of people are going to be waking up this morning very anxious, not least, of course, the, I think, 200,000 British nationals in the region, many of them in Dubai, where you are. What is the latest news that you can tell us?
Hi to you, Sophie. Yeah, well, hopefully we'll stay connected this time. As I was saying to you in the last hit, when we broke up, even the internet here is a bit shaky and in and out at the moment. There is absolutely nothing normal about what is going on in the UAE and what has been going on over the course of the weekend. We're hearing reports that banking apps are down. I was unable to withdraw cash this morning. Even very basic things that you take for granted here don't seem to be working as they normally would. And of course, then there's the extremely volatile security situation. It did appear there was some sort of lull overnight in terms of the amount of explosions and loud blasts that we've been hearing, but they have returned this morning. At least a succession of at least 6 blasts were heard around 9 o'clock this morning in Dubai. Reports too from eyewitnesses that the air raid sirens have been going off near the airport in Abu Dhabi. And there's also a video circulating of an explosion in what looks like a residential area in the northern emirate of Ras Al Khaimah, close to a luxury hotel. We're also hearing that Amazon, they've confirmed that one of their data centers here in the UAE was hit by what they're describing as objects overnight. And then, of course, yes, the enormous British presence that's here in the UAE, not just in terms of the number of citizens who've chosen to make the UAE their home, around 250,000 of them, but also the number of people that come here on holiday. It's a really popular time of year in the winter to come here for some winter sunshine. And tens of thousands of people are estimated to be here on holiday at the moment. 300,000 British citizens have registered themselves as present in the Middle East with the Foreign Office. And yesterday, in one of their updates, they said that around 75% of the British citizens that had registered were here in the UAE. The large majority of them holidaymakers. And I guess when air travel reopens here, which has been delayed again by another 24 hours, Emirates has updated us in the last hour that flights will not be resuming before 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. It was originally 3 o'clock this afternoon. And I'm also hearing from certain travellers that they've been told the flights may not depart until Thursday at the earliest. Now, some people have been trying to get out of the UAE and some trying to get back into the UAE who are stranded abroad through the Omani border. And I'm hearing reports this morning there that people are being turned back, that border may now be closing. Certainly, it's extraordinary times here. People have been ordered to stay at home today. Businesses have been ordered to remote work for the next few days. Schools are closed as well. And Nasdaq Dubai, the International Financial Exchange, is also going to remain closed for the next 2 days. I should say, obviously, there is a lot of concern. People here are quite shaken up. It's going to be interesting when the airspace does reopen, the response from those tourists that are here on holiday. I've spoken to some who just want to get out of here. They cannot wait to get home. Others are more relaxed. They're lying on sun lounges around pools. And it's the same with residents. Some seem to be quite chilled out about the situation and think that normality is going to return very, very soon. Others are really freaking out and have moved to hotels in Northern Emirates. Some also escaped to Oman on that first night of attacks on Saturday. Port Rashid, which is just north of Dubai, I'm hearing from eyewitnesses there this morning that the aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, which has been in the region for several weeks now, is parked up, as they put it, opposite Port Rashid, just north of Dubai. So, I mean, some are saying, well, look, the Americans have given us their biggest warship. The biggest warship in the world is just sitting off Dubai's coast. We couldn't be more protected. And the UAE also has some of the most sophisticated air defense systems in the world. They've intercepted hundreds of drones, hundreds of missiles in the last 2 to 3 days. I think the concern is we just don't know how many drones the Iranians have got and how willing they are to continue this war, striking Gulf states. It's certainly really rattled people here. It's unclear when normality will return. And I guess the big fear is that this sense of instability and uncertainty could be a new normal, not just for the UAE, but for the region.
Sally in Dubai, thanks so much. Let's go to David now in Washington. David, 48 hours in, do we have any firmer conviction of precisely what President Trump's aim is with all of this? And I guess, crucially stemming from that, his commitment to delivering on that aim?
Well, not really. The White House is working very hard to control the narrative. I think it was telling last night that the president didn't take questions from reporters on Air Force One as he returned from Florida to Washington. That's very out of character. Instead, his own team recorded his second address to the nation in 48 hours and posted it on his own Truth Social platform. And in that address, he really was preparing the American people for a couple of things. The possibility of this going on for a while. He said combat operations would continue until they had achieved their objective. Speaking to a reporter on the phone earlier, he had predicted 4 weeks. And then the possibility of more American lives being lost. We know that 3 US service personnel have already been killed by a strike on a base in Kuwait. And actually, a few moments ago, Kuwait's Ministry of Defense said several US warplanes had crashed this morning, but all crew members have survived. But it is a reminder of the danger they face. And that danger really is Donald Trump's worst nightmare. Because when coffins start coming home draped in American flags, then it redraws the political battlefield here at home. Because Donald Trump was the president who mocked foreign wars, who was scathing of his predecessors for engaging in them, who vowed during the election campaign that American blood would no longer be spilt in these far-off places. Now, he has clearly changed his mind, as he's entitled to do. But no matter how he strategically justifies that, he must know that this is a decision that is going to be tested when Americans go to the polls in the midterm elections later this year. So this is not just a defining moment for Iran. It's a moment of reckoning for Donald Trump too, because the outcome of this war with Iran is going to define his presidency.
David, thank you very much indeed. Let's talk now to our Security and Defence Editor, Deborah Haynes, who joins us now. Deborah, I thought it was interesting talking to the Foreign Secretary this morning about the specific use of UK air bases, saying that it would only be defensive, it was nothing about, kind of political targets. What do you make about the UK's involvement in this war?
I mean, because the UK has military bases and personnel across the region, it was always going to be sucked into the war, whether it liked it or not. I mean, on top of that, you've obviously got, as the Foreign Secretary was saying, around 300,000 British citizens living or holidaying or working across the Gulf region. And so they, too, are in the firing line, and that, too, is a massive headache for the Foreign Office and for the UK government. From the beginning, Keir Starmer and the rest of the cabinet have really been tying themselves in knots when it comes to this question of allowing the Americans to use British bases, specifically RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire and also Diego Garcia in the Chagos Islands, to launch strikes against Iran. These are two British air bases used as an American air base presence too, large bombers based there, clearly important to be able to strike targets inside or against the regime. And the British decided that they weren't going to give that permission in the run-up to the actual war starting, much to the frustration, as we heard, from Donald Trump. And now, because you're seeing Iran predictably lashing back, fighting back, launching these missiles and drones across the region, including with a drone. We don't know if it's an Iranian drone or one fired by Hezbollah, hitting an RAF base in Cyprus. Suddenly the threat is very direct and against the UK. And so that clearly is why the calculation has changed. It will be interesting, the first pictures that I'm sure we will see of American planes launching from RAF Fairford to strike Iran. That will be a moment. But in terms of the risk for the UK more broadly, we've already had that one strike of a drone hitting this British base in Cyprus. I understand, well, the Foreign Secretary said it hit the runway. I understand that the damage was very minimal. In the run-up to this anticipated American action, we know that the British sent fast jets to Cyprus, more of them, more to Qatar. I also understand that hundreds of British military personnel were forward deployed to Cyprus to help bolster defences there. We know that there are counter-drone units. We also know from the Prime Minister that the Ukrainians are actually going to be offering advice and support in terms of countering drones in the Gulf, which is an interesting development too. But there is still a vulnerability. We're not going to be able to shoot down everything that comes towards the UK. Yes, there's a big American aircraft carrier parked off the coast of Cyprus, which will be a big envelope when it comes to bolstering air defences. But it's a huge risk. And if there is one significant strike that gets through, then that becomes a really big problem, not just for Donald Trump, but also for the UK. One final point, just to show how risky this is. We were told by the Defence Secretary yesterday that the Iranian strike against a US naval base in Bahrain on Saturday, there's a British base also there with some 300 British personnel, and that strike landed just 200 metres away from some of them. So that shows just how close they are to these attacks and just how dangerous a moment this is for everybody.
Deb, as always, thanks so much. Deborah Haynes there, our Defence and Security Editor. We'll be back speaking to all of our correspondents on this story later on in the morning.
Now, look, we're devoting pretty much the whole programme to Iran rightly this morning, but there's always a calculation when you're making kind of morning programmes like ours about whether or not domestic stories, domestic issues are things that we cover at the same time as well. And there is one issue going on today that I think we feel strongly enough that it is worth giving a pause in our coverage of Iran to reflect on. And to discuss it now is Baroness Burton. Great to have you on the programme. There's an important vote going on today in the House of Lords, and it's about, difficult for breakfast audiences, I know, but it's about child abuse, right?
That's right, absolutely. We are taking forward many votes, hopefully, tonight. Well, hopefully not if the government comes forward with some proposals. But we are essentially saying that violent pornography that would not be legal offline should not be legal online. And there are various strands to this, but we are absolutely saying that any kind of content that mimics child sexual abuse, the barely legal category, step incest, all these sort of awful subjects that people don't want to hear about this time in the morning. But I'm afraid they're rife, they're mainstream, and they're changing the way people behave, and it has to come to an end.
We've discussed this before with you. I mean, I repeat the same thing I said the first time. I can't believe this isn't already illegal. I guess since we last spoke, are you saying that this is not something the government has wished to take forward themselves? Or is it just a case of parliamentary time, that they're not against banning this?
No. Well, look, in fairness to the government, I've been speaking to them actually over the weekend. I have allies in the government. I think Liz Kendall really gets this and wants to take action. Likewise, obviously, Jess Phillips is a huge ally of mine on this front. It's complicated, but I'm afraid we have a job to do in the Lords and in Parliament to really push the government to go as fast and as far as they can on this issue. And it's something that I feel strongly about because I did a big review into it. It's the kind of issue that people don't really want to talk about because there's a taboo, it's uncomfortable, but we can't look away anymore. And I think that the Epstein depositions have shown how much abuse, complicity, how powerful this industry is as well. And we have to hold it to account. It's got very light touch accountability at the moment. That has to end.
I think that's it. You know, you say how it's a subject that none of us want to talk about. I'm sure it's not something that you want to be spending your time.
I can't wait to change the record, Sophie.
It's a lot. And I wrestle with it as well, particularly this time in the morning. You're like, oh, God, do people really need to hear about this? Do we need to really talk about it? But I think the answer is that, yeah, we do. And you were saying there about how behaviour is changing. And this is something that I find very alarming when you look at this issue more widely, that, and I don't mean all porn, I mean violent or extreme porn, it is changing behaviour.
That's right. And it's not being led by sexual taste. They're actually leading sexual taste, essentially. And I think that you've got to remember, you know, so let's take incest porn. There's 4 billion pieces of incest content. It is one of the highest and most popular bits of porn out there. I mean, I just find that extraordinary. Likewise, searches for teen porn. I mean, this is sort of just basically a fig leaf for sexualising minors, and it just has to stop.
It's just absolutely shocking when you say those statistics, and again, it's sort of surprising that it's not already illegal. What about the age verifications on porn? Have they worked? Or is there more to be done there?
I think I think they've certainly helped the situation. I think they've helped children unwittingly sort of fall into seeing porn online, which is obviously a good thing. Have they stopped 15-year-old boys who want to find it because they can circumnavigate VPNs via VPNs? Then no, that hasn't. I don't think it's helped the situation. I think there has to be much better age verification on VPNs as well. And I think that the other point I would make is that age verification for consumers is absolutely right to be put in place. We have no age verification. There's no duty on porn companies to check that the performers are over 18, to check that they've given consent. And I'm afraid I just think that is the least we can ask of an industry whose commodity is humans.
Can I ask you about social media? Because it seems to me that if you look at like a platform like X, there's a lot of porn on X, right? I think it's one of the biggest.
That's the main source. That is
right?
where people get most of their porn. That's absolutely right.
So the age verification on X, I guess, is what, 13?
I think, in fairness, they have to put for pornographic content. They also have to have a separate age gate.
Yeah.
Yes.
But just on the wider point about social media and a ban for under 16s, is that something that you're in favour of?
100%. Yeah. I have a 13-year-old daughter, and it is a daily battle. And I just think that until there is much more safety by design and better checks on what should be given to children. Not least, there's obviously the very harmful content, but there's also content that is sort of selling to our children. You know, they know about products they shouldn't know about. There seems to be absolutely no checks and balances put on these companies, and I think that just has to end. And then I think, you know, afterwards you can have a proper conversation about, well, what would be safe for under 16s, and of course they will find ways around it, like they do with drink and cigarettes. But there's no suggestion that we should lower the age for those kind of harmful activities.
These issues seem very sensible. I guess stepping back, I wonder what your view is on the extent to which the Lords is sort of taking the lead on a lot of these issues. I guess we just saw it as well in a very high-profile way with the assisted dying bill, and whether that's right.
It's suboptimal, to be perfectly honest. I would rather not be bringing forward these amendments. I'd rather it was all done as part of a big governmental package. I think the government has done quite a bit. You know, let's not. I'm not remotely going to be rude about this government, because I think they've done some big announcements, but I think a sort of much more strategic look at this issue, and certainly in terms of business disruption mechanisms, because ultimately porn is about money, and you need to think properly about how can you actually attack the sort of the funding streams of this issue, and better regulation is the way forward on that, I believe.
Gabby, I was wondering if we could ask a little bit about Iran, because look, you were obviously right by the side of David Cameron throughout his premiership. And it does feel like there's been multiple conflicts in the Middle East. I'm thinking about Libya, Iraq. People would potentially say about Iran too, well, we've gone into these conflicts or become involved in them without a clear plan for what happens next. Is that, with your own experience, a fear that you have for Iran?
Well, of course it is, because I think that I am largely in favour of what has happened here, because I think that having sort of that kind of regime having a nuclear power was terrifying. But, you know, what happens next is hugely complicated. And I'm obviously not in government anymore, so I have no insider knowledge on that. But I hope that they are thinking about this 24/7, because, you know, that is the key thing.
How damaged do you think the UK-US relationship will be by the you can't use our bases?
Well, again, I think it's going to be a very sort of difficult diplomatic tightrope to manage, and I hope sincerely that the US and UK can start becoming proper allies again in a way that perhaps we've seen difficulty over the past sort of few months.
I remember talking to advisor of Boris Johnson, who said that Boris Johnson was the thing that surprised him most about becoming Prime Minister was the amount of time that's taken up by foreign affairs, the amount of decisions that are made. Was it the same for David Cameron?
Well, Prime Ministers get criticised all the time for sort of not focusing on the domestic and being distracted by foreign affairs. But to be perfectly honest, it's very difficult not to be, because they are, you know, they matter to the world order, and particularly in a situation at the moment and where the world seems to be, these big things seem to be shifting in such a huge way. So I have sympathy with the Prime Minister at the moment. You know, I hope, and the Foreign Secretary, and I wish them well, because these are big things.
Baroness Burton, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you. We'll take a quick break up next. First break for a while. We'll be back with more analysis of the very latest in the Middle East.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
I just want to come back with these images that have been circulated on social media quite a lot of the last hour or so. They're coming from the Ministry of Defense of Kuwait, who's updated that a number of US fighters did fall, but the pilots ejected safely. The Kuwaiti Ministry of Defense saying that a couple of US jets fell from the sky, and this is some imagery of at least one of them. Earlier on in that video, you can see the pilot ejecting as well. Now, we wanted to update you on the market reaction, the financial market reaction, in particular oil prices to all of this development. Of course, markets were closed largely in the weekend, so there was a lot of anticipation about how markets would open this morning. Let's snapshot on oil prices in particular. Clearly, they have responded. When oil futures opened late last night, it was about a 12% increase in oil prices. Then that pared back, only 4 or 5% in the early hours of this morning. It's picking up again, so it's up 9.5% the oil price this morning. Of course, that's a very significant one-day move. It's worth noting that other assets perhaps aren't reacting as much as you might expect. Gold, of course, a safe haven trade is up, but only 2.4%. And equity markets perhaps could have reacted more as well. For example, in Japan, I think the market closed down 1.4%. The FTSE 100, which is now open, down 0.9%. Now, that 10% or so oil price increase, very significant for a one-day move, but also worth noting how much it's moved so far this year. If we show you a chart of the oil price over the course of the last 12 months, you can see that year to date, since January, it's up some 26%, and a lot of that was in anticipation of potential Middle East conflict. So it is a significant move in and around all of the action of the last weekend. Just a point of note as well, oil prices last summer in the 12-day war against Iran spiked significantly. They pared back quite quickly, and of course that's because the war did not persist for that long, and that is one of the key factors to watch going on from here. Not just where the oil price gets to, but how long it rises. And of course, if you're talking about inflation here domestically, you require quite a persistence of elevated commodity prices, whereas the brief spike last summer didn't really factor in. Why is this all moving? Well, here's a chart of Iran's oil output. Left-hand side is the daily barrels per day in the blue bar chart. So about 3.5 million barrels per day. The yellow line and the right-hand side is the percentage, that is, of global supply. Not that much, only about 4%. And by the way, about 95% of that goes east to Asia. So it doesn't come to the West, albeit, of course, oil price, global commodity, it rises one place, it rises everywhere. So why is it having such an effect if it's only 4% of global supply? If we look at a map of the south of Iran, with the Straits of Hormuz, which you've probably heard mentioned a lot over the course of the weekend, marked on it, even if Iran only is representing 4% of global oil supplies, around 15 to 20% of global oil supply has to pass through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. And it doesn't take much conflict in the broader region to shut down commercial ships from wanting to travel through there. Of course, the bar for them to have to play safe is much lower than for military ships. And again, we come back to the question, not so much of the scale of conflict. We've already crossed the line for that being enough to shut down a lot of the travel through the Straits of Hormuz. It's the persistence from here. If we have weeks of the scale of conflict we have at the moment, then I think you'll see oil prices go a lot higher and it start to affect global markets and other asset classes a lot more than it has done already, Sophie.
Fascinating stuff, just putting the kind of financial picture in real sharp relief there. Well, to get more on this and the conflict in Iran is someone who knows an awful a lot, I think it's fair to say, about geopolitics and about this kind of thing. The former UK ambassador to the US, Sir Peter Westmacott, great to have you here.
Good morning, Sophie.
It's said that the question that we should all ask at the beginning of these kind of conflicts is, tell me how this ends. Do you think that question's been asked?
I think it's been asked by a lot of people. I don't think any of us are seeing any good answers to it. Normally speaking, if you're going to embark on an exercise like this, and we had the same debate 20 years ago in Iraq, how does this end? Where do we go after the easy bit, the military part? You need to have some sort of answers. There weren't good answers in Iraq, and there's no evidence that the White House has produced answers to those questions or even asked them, because we haven't had the case made to Congress, we haven't had the case made to the United Nations Security Council, we haven't had the case made to the American people, really, that there is a good reason for America to go to war and launch all these attacks. They've talked about the threat of nuclear weapons, but a few days earlier, America was saying, well, actually, no, there isn't an imminent threat, even if the Iranians are trying to start enrichment again. They've talked a bit about missiles, but the missiles, they are rebuilding their missiles after a lot of them were destroyed in the 12-day war back in June. But, you know, where is the strong case for doing this? And it looks like it's regime change, and to some extent, a little bit of a vanity project, because remember that President Trump promised the Iranian people he would be with them if they took to the streets. Tens of thousands were slaughtered by the Khamenei regime before he was killed, and America did nothing. So there's probably an element of wanting to look a little bit better. But then what? We've now got rid of Khamenei. The president has said, oh, well, the guys we had in mind to take over seem to be dead now, so we've got to think again about a new leadership. The Iranians were ready for this. They knew that Khamenei was either going to be killed or was going to die of natural causes. He was 86 years old, after all. They've got this interim council of 3 people. They're going to work out who is the definitive successor. Is it going to be another, theocratic Ayatollah type? Don't know. Or will it be more revolutionary guards who could be pragmatic, could be more interested in survival and wealth and stability and prosperity for themselves than ideology? We just don't know. But so the answer to your question, I'm afraid, is that I'm not sure those questions have been adequately asked, and they certainly haven't been adequately answered.
Have you been surprised or not, Peter, by, again, on both sides, the seeming success of the US attacks so far and their might and ability, and on the other side, the lack of success from Iran's response, or are we understating that, or is there more to come?
I don't think it's been surprising how well militarily the Americans have done. It is a fantastically effective machine. Donald Trump says he's rebuilt the military single-handed, and that may be an exaggeration, but they are very good at this stuff. We saw what they did in Venezuela, slightly high risk, but brilliant execution. And they and the Israelis, who've got a lot of the really key intelligence about the targets and who to hit and where they are and who's having breakfast in which bunker, so on, that is clear from their previous outings. So, no, I'm not particularly surprised by the success of the military operations. I'm a little bit surprised that nobody really knows how successful the bunker busters were back in June in destroying the enrichment facilities. No one's quite clear how damaged they are. Are they obliterated? Or is there still half a ton of highly enriched uranium, which could eventually be made into a bomb? Nobody seems to be clear about that. But no, I think militarily, not a surprise, nor was the timing. We all knew it was going to happen in the next few days. There was a question, was it Saturday, was it Sunday, was it daylight, was it nighttime? And so they have done an extraordinary job. What I'm a little surprised about is that the Iranians, who clearly have had some time since last June, but that's not very long. Imagine what we would do in 9 months, here in the UK, if we had to rebuild our military defence facilities. They've launched hundreds of missiles. I'm sorry they've done it, the Gulf states, the poor Gulf states who are innocent in this. But, in Abu Dhabi, which is not known for its military prowess, they've shot down, about 95% of the missiles and drones that have been launched at them with their own anti-aircraft defence kit. That has surprised me, that they've done so well. Of course, there have been some booms, there have been a few strikes on hotels and ports, and that's worrying for tourism, it's worrying for markets, it's worrying for trade. But that has surprised me, that the Gulfies have done so well, with some American help, of course, in, if you like, not fighting back, but seeing off some of those missile attacks that the Iranians have thrown at them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Can I ask you a bit about the UK response? Because it's a tough one for Keir Starmer, right? We talked about it a lot on the programme today. Initially saying that absolutely not getting involved at all, we're going to refuse any request to use the bases. That position's changed. They're now allowing the US to use the bases.
Yeah.
Is that the right political calculation?
I think the first reaction, which I noticed that Defence Secretary John Healey didn't really want to deal with in the Sunday shows, was that under international law, it was not legitimate to launch this attack, and therefore the Brits wouldn't be involved, and we could not allow the Americans to use British bases, which are, of course, very important for them in operations in the Middle East. I think a lot of people were rather rude about that, especially the conservatives on the far right were saying, this is pathetic, why don't we support our allies? Well, I think the lawyers were looking at it and saying it's very hard to argue this is justifiable. And remember that all the previous things, whether it's Iraq or Syria or Libya, whichever British government it has, they've had to ask themselves the same question of the law officers. Is this legal or is it not? If it is, okay. If it's not, if we haven't got the United Nations Security Council or international law or self-defense, you can't do it. So that's it's not new and it's not different. We do have a lawyer as Prime Minister, so it's not surprising he should look at it in that way. Now, I think the calculation has changed. Some unkind souls will say this is another U-turn, but actually because we have now had attacks on British interests from Iranians, then it becomes an issue of self-defense. And now I think it's legally much more clear-cut and it's politically not difficult. So I think it's the right call. It happens to make the relationship with the United States, I suspect, easier because we're no longer saying to them that you can't use your bases for defensive purposes. So the Iranian attacks have made that slightly easier.
I'm interested, do you think the net effect will be an easier relationship rather than the lack of permission in the first place damaging the relationship? Does it not make the US think that general point that they've had for some years now, perhaps unfounded, that we always have to do all the hard work and you guys don't step up when needed?
I think it is a problem. But over the years, they have made extensive use of places like Diego Garcia and RAF Fairford and different Ascension Island, different facilities that we have made available to them. And very rarely has the United Kingdom government had to say to them, sorry, can't do that, because our law officers say that it is not possible. When I was ambassador in Washington, we had a tricky problem because President Obama wanted to bomb Syria over the use of chemical weapons in 2013. It wasn't so much the law officers, but Parliament said, you know what, we're not going along with this. And there was a moment of rupture there. In fact, from President Obama's point of view, who then went to Congress, who said, we haven't got the votes either, Mr. President, they decided to do something different. So this has been around for a while. We are extremely forthcoming in terms of the facilities we make available to the Americans around the world for defense purposes. But they are used to the fact that we have to apply international law over the use. And very rarely is there a problem. So I would like to think that this will not be an issue of lasting damage. What it may have done is made it more difficult for the Americans to go along with the extremely complex Diego Garcia deal, which is still stuck in the weeds somewhere, or in the upper house of the House of Lords committees. That may be a problem, because he lashed out on Diego Garcia after he was told that, sorry, you can't use this for offensive purposes, you can only use it for defensive. But I'm hoping that in the longer term it doesn't actually do any material damage to the perceptions of the UK as a reliable ally.
Thank you so much. It's been so interesting to talk, as always. Honestly, we could have talked all day, but I'm sure we'll get you back on in the coming weeks.
I remember the insurance thing about your shipping point.
Absolutely.
Is very important. London is essentially the international insurance market. And if Lloyd's say that the premiums for these ships are now unacceptably high, that's going to interfere with shipping. Yeah, it's not just the military threat in the Straits of Hormuz.
Yeah, no, that's the point. Commercial ship, the bar is crossed. Yeah. Now, the question is how long being above the bar persists, and 9% move in the oil price will seem small if this lasts for weeks and months. It'll suddenly rise more. We'll see.
Well, there's a reasonable chance it won't last that long.
Yeah, we shall see. Peter, thank you. Great to see you as always.
Thanks.
Now, the Foreign Office trying to evacuate tens of thousands of stranded British nationals across the Gulf region. Blasts have been heard this morning in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, Qatar and Bahrain. Will Bailey is a British influencer in Dubai, and he shared this moment when a fire raged at a nearby hotel following an attack.
We're in Dubai right now, as you've seen in my videos. We're stood on the palm. We're watching missiles fly across. They're being intercepted. One has just hit the Fairmont Hotel behind me. You can't see it, but go on my Instagram and you'll see the smoke. I think it was a missile that was intercepted. It fell onto the hotel. And if we were leaving as that happened, if we were 30 seconds earlier, we would have been in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, Will Bailey joins us now from Dubai. Will, great to have you with us. How long have you been based in Dubai? And I guess no matter what kind of happens in neighbouring countries, did you expect it to always be a peaceful place?
Of course, and I think most people did. I landed early hours of Saturday morning, straight to sleep, woke up and saw that, you know, everything had started. I was in the process of moving here, moving my life here from the UK, as a lot of people have, to start my new business here, my coaching business. And obviously that's all stopped dead in its tracks at the moment.
And just talk us through the scale to which these explosions in and around Dubai or above the skies of Dubai have persisted since that initial video you posted.
Yeah, look, like it's been, the way to describe it is calm but very tense. They're very infrequent, the explosions that you can hear. Obviously everybody was very shaken up after the Fairmont hotel incident, and then since then it has just been very irregular explosions. Obviously the UAE are doing a great job of intercepting majority of what's coming over here, but you know, like yesterday afternoon there was an 8-hour period where we didn't hear a single sound, and then this morning we heard 2 of the loudest ones yet. So yeah, calm but tense is the way to describe it at the moment.
The Foreign Office and the Foreign Secretary have told us that they're looking at a wide range of options to help people in countries targeted by Iran over the weekend. Have you had any kind of reassurance or any contact with British authorities?
So everybody who's in Dubai, everybody's obviously talking to each other, has been sending around this form that we've all been filling in, obviously letting the UK know that we're here. I think something like over 100,000 people have put their details in now. We've had a few generic emails. Obviously, I would assume that if things did get worse here, then we would hear much more from the UK. But for now, it's just, you know, follow the advice that the UAE are telling us, stay indoors. Yeah, that's about it.
Do you feel under threat at the moment or not?
No, I think anybody who's saying that they do feel under threat, especially in Dubai, is exaggerating. It's just, yeah, like I said, calm but tense. Like you'll hear a few explosions, of course, but nobody should feel like they're under direct attack, so to say.
It's interesting, we spoke to our correspondent Sally, who's in Dubai at the minute, and she said that response has been really split between some people who are very, very anxious, trying to find a way of getting out as quickly as they can, and other people who are completely relaxed, just out on sun lounges, you know, making the most of it still. Are you kind of somewhere in the middle between those two reactions, would you say?
This is the thing. So I'm taking shelter, so to say, with a group of 5 people, and all 5 of us were 50 metres away from that drone strike on the Fairmont, which completely shook us. You know, if we hadn't seen that, maybe we would be a lot more relaxed. And as I'm sure most people are, they haven't seen that, they didn't hear that, they didn't see the drone come down and the flames go up and the people screaming. So I think we're definitely a lot more on edge than other people. I can understand why some people, you know, are taking it more lightly than others. But yeah, there are obviously people out there who are exaggerating the situation as well.
Does it change your long-term perspective of wanting to have moved to Dubai and start your business there or not?
It's a question I'm trying to figure out as well, to be honest. I think no. I think generally it is a very safe area to be in. But you know, if this all ends tomorrow, of course I will stay here. If it lasts another 3 weeks, months, then it's a different story.
Thank you so much. It's been great to have you on. Glad that you're following all the advice, sheltering, and do stay safe, of course. But it's good to hear that things have perhaps calmed down a little bit where you are. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, of course, we're continuing to cover the latest when it comes to the fast-moving situation that we've seen over the weekend when it comes to Iran and everything else as well. A couple of things just to bring you now. Israel refusing to rule out a ground operation in Lebanon. And also, of course, we're seeing the damage in Lebanon after those Israeli airstrikes going on.
I do want to just bring you again those striking pictures of a US aircraft falling out of the sky over Kuwait, and a Kuwaiti foreign minister spokesperson saying that this was a US aircraft, but the pilots did eject. In fact, in an early part of that video, I think just there, you could see the pilot ejecting out of it. The questions over exactly why that came about, possibly an issuance of friendly fire, certainly not a confirmation from the spokesperson that it was an Iranian attack, but that quite arresting photographs there, video, including the pilot ejecting. According to the Kuwaiti spokesperson, was a US aircraft, but with nobody affected.
There's also a bit of a move here in the United Kingdom about whether or not Keir Starmer needs to come to Parliament to set out the legal case for allowing the use of the military air bases to the United States. Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, saying that this is a slippery slope. The Prime Minister must not let Trump drag Britain into another prolonged war in the Middle East. He is calling on Keir Starmer to come to Parliament tomorrow to set out the legal case and, critically, to give MPs a vote on this, because I think it is fair to say that there is a wide range of political reaction to this in the UK, from Reform and the Conservatives on the one hand, who probably would say that he should have given the US the use of the bases right from the beginning, all the way over to the Lib Dems, more worried, and of course the Green Party too, who had that striking victory from the Labour Party in Gorton and Denton, not least, of course, over their policy in the Middle East.
Gosh, and we haven't really spoken about that at all today. Shows the craziness of the developments. And, of course, a significant policy announcement from the Home Secretary today as well, lacking coverage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Of course, changing the rules around permanent status for refugees. We should also just mention a latest snapshot on the markets, which is... was relatively calm earlier. That calmness is easing away and evaporating somewhat, up 8 or 9% for oil prices this morning. So very significant one-day move. It had been up more late last night and pared that back, but picking up again. Worth noting, though, that the FTSE 100 here, the UK equity market, is only down 1%, so not spreading yet, this effect. So we'll see how that develops as the day goes on.
Yeah, fast-moving day here for us all mornings, and on Sky News we'll bring you the very latest on geopolitics and the fallout from those Iran strikes.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
Sophie and Wilf, good morning from both of us. An awful lot of fallout on Iran.
Conflict in the Middle East spreads to Lebanon. Israel exchanges fire with Hezbollah and tells people to evacuate.
3 US service members are killed in Kuwait. Donald Trump says attacks will continue at full force and more US troops are likely to die.
The UK says the US can use British military bases. Hours later, a UK base in Cyprus is hit by a drone.
We'll discuss the latest on the UK's involvement in the conflict.
And oil prices surge nearly 10%. We'll have the financial market reaction.
Good morning. Thanks for being with us. We've heard the words unprecedented an awful lot over the last couple of days since Israel and the US launched a joint strike against Iran. The Middle East now in crisis. People across the region are living in fear of where could be struck next.
Military bases and civilian sites have been targeted in retaliation in the UAE, Israel and Kuwait, amongst other places. The inevitable casualties on all sides have begun to rise.
Yeah, so our whole programme this morning is going to be devoted to the crisis. It's a fast-moving story. We'll bring you all the developments as they happen, but we'll also try and step back and ask that crucial question: what happens next?
First, let's bring you up to speed with the latest strikes overnight. The conflict spilled into Lebanon as Israel exchanged fire with Hezbollah.
So people in Beirut jolted awake by a series of loud explosions that actually shook buildings. Sky News understands that there was no warning the attacks were about to happen before the IDF, the Israeli Defence Force, launched 10 strikes on the capital's southern suburbs. The military then issued evacuation orders for dozens of towns across Lebanon. Lebanon's health ministry says at least 31 people have been killed.
And as the strikes began, thousands of people were seen fleeing Beirut in their cars and on foot. A resident described the moment the attack began.
At first, there were 3 explosions. They were a bit far. We went up to the roof and saw that the explosions were behind us. We could only see the smoke. After about 10 minutes, there was another strike, right behind us. We all fled, and after another 10 minutes, there was the last strike. It was 3 consecutive strikes. We came here, and thank God we are OK now.
Well, our Middle East correspondent Adam Parsons is following the conflict from Jerusalem.
Yeah, I suppose that is, in terms of the geopolitics, that's the standout one at the moment. So Lebanon is right up in the north of Israel, and Hezbollah, which is not the Lebanese government, but is a significant political military force, particularly in the south of Lebanon, and has had funding from Iran, has launched rockets into northern Israel. It says as an act of vengeance for the memory of Ayatollah, the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, who was killed, of course, on the first day of this war. Now, those rockets have not caused any damage at all in northern Israel. A couple of them landed in a field and were allowed to go off there. The others were intercepted. In fact, Israel, we understand, has used a new technology called the Iron Beam, which is a laser beam intercept technology there in Lebanon. But what has happened is that Israel has responded with much, much more military might than Hezbollah showed, has attacked targets across Lebanon, particularly in the south, but also in Beirut. And we understand that 31 people have been killed. The Israelis are talking about maintaining that attack for the next couple of days. Israel knew, or was almost sure, that Hezbollah would attack. It had reinforced that border, put a division up there just a few days ago. And it's worth saying this is not something that's come out of the blue. There has been tit-for-tat attacks for a while. Of course, this follows on from a ceasefire after a war between Israel and Hezbollah. So that very uneasy peace has now broken, and Israel is launching those attacks. I think Israel sees this as an opportunity to try to absolutely degrade Hezbollah in the way that clearly it has degraded or has attempted to degrade Hamas in Gaza. So that's what's happening up there in Lebanon. The Americans and Israelis continue to attack Iran overnight. More huge attacks on Iran and indeed on the capital, Tehran. There were Iranian missiles coming back in this direction as well. Very big barrage overhead last night. And there were more waves came across this morning, but not actually for about 2.5 hours. So it has been peaceful here in that time, but of course that can change rapidly. Israel waking up today, having had a jolt yesterday when an Iranian missile got through its air defences and struck a town, a very large town, west of Jerusalem, a place called Beit Shemesh, which the missile hit an area. We were there yesterday, destroying homes, a school, a synagogue, and directly striking a bomb shelter in which it would appear 9 people were killed and many others were wounded. And for many Israelis, that is a horrendous wake-up call. It is, I think, easy for Israeli civilians to become a little complacent because their aerial defences, the Iron Dome, the other mechanisms, are so effective at blocking missiles. But as one military official said to me yesterday, nothing can be 100% effective. Missiles do get through. Also, so does the debris from those missiles. Some people were injured in the edge of Jerusalem yesterday when debris fell. We know that in Tel Aviv there have been more injuries. And I have to say, I think part of Iran's strategy is, and we've seen this, is not just to attack Israel. It is to try to embroil the wider region.
You're looking now at live pictures from Beit Shemesh, the Israeli city that was the target of an Iranian strike that killed at least 9 people and injured 27. That is the aftermath there of what is the situation in Beit Shemesh, the clean-up operation, I'm sure, beginning.
Let's bring in Sally from Dubai now for us. And Sally, to what extent has there continued to be attacks on and in and around Dubai, whether successful or not, and how has it changed both the people's perception of Iran, but perhaps more importantly, the broader leadership of many of the Gulf states following Iran's response over the last few days?
It's safe to say this has been an extraordinary 2 to 3 days here in the UAE, not just for civilians, citizens, holidaymakers here, but also for Gulf states who are now experiencing a very new reality. For a long time, the UAE, Qatar, Saudi, they've had fairly decent relations with Iran. They were lobbying Donald Trump for some time not to attack Iran. They were very concerned about what war with Iran would mean for this region. And we are now experiencing the consequences of that and beginning to realise exactly what it does mean. I don't think many people expected the UAE to be hit quite as hard as it has been, and certainly not civilian areas like Dubai. I mean, we've seen extraordinary scenes of residential areas, a 5-star hotel, a 7-star hotel being hit by falling debris. We've seen naval assets targeted. Dubai International Airport, Abu Dhabi International Airport have both been hit over the weekend. And then overnight, Amazon confirmed that one of their data centers was also hit here in the UAE. It's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, this morning we've heard a series of loud blasts once again by air defense systems, fast jets flying overhead. And there's a video circulating of an explosion in what looks like a residential area in the northern emirate of Ras Al Khaimah. I mean, we anticipated that American military assets and air bases could be targeted here in the event of war with Iran. I think very few people expected the scenes that we've seen in the last few days. It certainly shocked people here and shocked people around the world. But it's also worth drawing your attention to what's happening in Kuwait at the moment. Of course, Donald Trump confirmed that 3 US service personnel were killed in Kuwait yesterday, another 5 seriously injured. But we're also receiving word this morning that US fighter jets have crashed in Kuwait. Several of them is what we're being told. Their crew have survived and they've been recovered and taken to hospital. the Ministry of Defence in Kuwait is reporting that their condition is stable, but certainly this is a very dramatic development coming out of Kuwait, and we don't yet know the circumstances of how those US fighter jets crashed. But even Donald Trump himself, when he made that announcement last night in that video message, he said, you know, regrettably, three American service personnel have been killed, the first in this war, and they probably won't be the last. And I think here there is a concern that we just don't know how long this is going to go on for. Emirates have confirmed this morning that air travel won't resume at 3 o'clock this afternoon, as previously announced, that's been delayed until 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And indeed, some travellers are hearing that they won't fly before Thursday. Now, the Foreign Office in the UK has confirmed that they are in touch with British citizens in the Middle East. Around 300,000 are said to have registered their presence with the UK Foreign Office. And in an update yesterday, they did say that a large number of them, around 3/4, were here in the UAE, and a large number of them were holidaymakers. Now, I've spoken to some who are here on holiday, and they've said, look, you know, I'm not due to fly back until next week, but once the airports reopen, I just want to get out of here as quickly as possible on the first flight. So I think what we will potentially see here when air travel does resume, and we don't know when that is yet, that we could see quite a frantic rush to the airport. I think that the Foreign Office, we understand, is looking into repatriating the thousands of British nationals that are here, suggestions that they might even be put on buses and may have to travel by road to Riyadh in order to fly back to the UK. We just don't know yet. It remains an extremely volatile situation here. Businesses are closed today. People have been told to work from home. Schools are closed as well. And I think for many here, they're hoping that, well, there is an expectation for some who feel more relaxed about the situation, that normality will return really soon. People can't quite imagine that it won't return really soon because people are so used to the sense of safety and the very privileged lifestyle that so many people enjoy living in the UAE. But there is also a concern among many that, you know, they just don't feel safe here anymore. And you know, I've spoken to residents who fled the UAE in the last couple of days. Some have made it to Oman, others have travelled to hotels in Northern Emirates. So while some people are more relaxed, others are really, really shaken up by what's happening. And we just don't know yet the extent of how long this is going to last and whether potentially this sense of instability and uncertainty is a new reality here.
Sally, thank you very much indeed. Sally Lockwood speaking to us there from Dubai.
Looking at a live picture there of Beirut in Lebanon. Peaceful at the moment. Of course, it hasn't been over the course of the last couple of days. We're going to bring you the latest market reaction. Ed Conway will join us next.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Big Sky News journalist. Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Welcome back. As we went to break, we showed you this live shot of Beirut in Lebanon and mentioned how it looked calm for now. There was not this smoke you see in your screen, and obviously shows the situation we're in, the fast-moving situation. An explosion in the last 3 minutes whilst we were in our commercial break. I think we can recap the moment that explosion happened.
So you can see there, that was the calm that we showed you before, literally just a few moments ago before going to break.
These are latest pictures, about 3 or 4 minutes delayed. We are awaiting that explosion to take place that led to the smoke you saw in the live pictures moments ago. You can see the smoke starting to come up. Of course, we can't comment on what caused it, and there it began in that building in the centre of your shot, as you can see. If we go back to the live picture, you'll see how that has developed, and again highlighting the fast-moving situation in the Middle East. Of course, we can't identify the source of what caused that.
Yeah, but as Wilf says, it just highlights the fast-moving situation, but also how this is turning into a conflict on multiple fronts, affecting multiple countries. This Beirut in Lebanon, and of course that really does prove to be a difficult situation for the Foreign Office here in the UK. 300,000 British nationals in the area. We spoke to the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, earlier on the programme. She confirmed that a drone did hit the runway at an RAF base in Cyprus, RAF Akrotiri, and that, of course, comes after the US said it would allow the US to use military bases owned by the UK. She spoke to us a bit earlier about why the UK was not involved in the strikes over the weekend, but has now confirmed the use of those bases.
We took a very specific decision not to provide support for strikes that were taking place over this weekend. We have been clear that we believe that there should be a diplomatic process, negotiations process. There is a major threat from Iran, not just to the region, but internationally.
But
their attempts to provide to get nuclear operations and also ballistic missile threats, and also the brutal attack in the region.
If it was so important to not be involved in the strike that we decided to not use the bases, and now Iran has done what would be utterly predictable that it was going to do, and we've just changed our mind. I guess a lot of people will be worried about, you know, the West getting involved in another Middle East conflict, right? Particularly when there doesn't seem to be any plan for what happens when it comes to regime change, any long-term plan. You can understand people's concern, right?
And I think there'll be a lot of concern, including from those who are there in the region at the moment. So many of our partner countries, and I have spoken to foreign ministers across the Gulf, who were frankly shocked and horrified at the way their countries have been targeted by Iran over the weekend. And they have been appalled by the attacks that they have faced from Iran, and they are seeking support and defensive support as well. And that is why I think it's so important that we recognise the responsibilities that we have around defensive support.
Well, that was the Foreign Secretary speaking to Sophy earlier. Deborah Haynes joins us once again now. Deborah, just how significant is it that a British base has been hit? Thankfully, not particularly successfully, but how significant is it? And I guess we can debate all day long the extent to which the UK should or shouldn't have allowed its bases to be used in the first place by the US. But what does it imply, all of this, about where our defence spending should be?
My favourite question. But just on the base, so RAF Akrotiri, it's a big British military base, so it's where the UK has, for example, forward-deployed 6 F-35 warplanes, which are involved in helping to provide air defences. I also understand that in the weeks leading up to the American-Israeli attack on Iran, we also moved forward hundreds of additional service personnel to Cyprus to help bolster defences, and that will be including people who can deal with drones, for example. But clearly this drone got through. The timing is actually quite interesting. I understand that the drone actually hit at around midnight local time. That's 10 o'clock last night UK time. So yes, well, technically that is just after the Prime Minister issued that statement when he made clear that the UK was U-turning on its decision about allowing the US to use British bases to launch strikes against Iran. The thinking, I understand, is that the drone itself was actually launched before that decision was made public, and an investigation is going on as to where the launch was from. Obviously, it's not necessarily from Iran. It could also have been fired from Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is perhaps more likely if you look at the geography, because clearly the drone has to travel to Cyprus, unless it was there was some sort of like shady cell on the island launching the drone against the UK. We don't know much about the drone itself, but the fact that it didn't cause much damage on the runway would suggest that it wasn't a very large piece of equipment. But of course, in terms of the question about the threat, yes, it is. It really underlines the fact that the UK it hasn't openly supported the US action against Iran, and has made clear that while it is absolutely no friend of the regime at all, views the regime as an enemy and wants all means to have stopped its purported nuclear weapons program, it did not support this offensive military action that's ended up in the killing of the supreme leader. However, that's happened, and because the UK is so closely allied with America, because it has so much military presence in the region, then it's going to be drawn into the war anyway. And now, with this decision that the UK has made to allow the base at RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire, where there is a big American fleet of bombers to launch attacks directly against Iran. Yes, they're saying that it's going to be limited in terms of the targets, only going after ballistic missile launchers, degrading Iran's ability to launch these attacks against allies in the Gulf and against the UK itself. Clearly, that Iran isn't going to see that distinction, is it? And so it does drag Britain more into the conflict. And then finally, in terms of the whole defence spending piece, when you actually look at the UK's capabilities to be able to shoot down, in particular, ballistic missiles, they are woeful at the moment, frankly. We only have Type 45 destroyers that are capable of doing that. Their capability is actually fairly limited, effective, but going after the kind of ballistic missile that Iran would have to use if it wanted to, for example, target the airbase in Cyprus, would be a medium-range one, which would have to go out of the Earth's atmosphere, landing, when it lands, at extreme speed and intensity. It's a very difficult target to blast out of the sky. Yes, we've seen Israel and the Americans do this repeatedly over the last couple of days, but it is a very dangerous weapon, and the UK really is going to be relying a lot on America when it comes to defending the airbase in Cyprus from that kind of threat, though clearly we've got jets in the sky going after drones. That's an expensive option because the missiles that the jets launch are far more expensive than the drones firing coming at them. And then we also have, presumably, and we know we have it in Iraq because they shot a drone down on Saturday, these counter-drone units, they're sort of ground troops that can shoot drones out the sky.
Deborah, really interesting to talk, as always. Deborah Hames, our Defence Editor. Well, we can speak now to the Shadow Defence Secretary, James Cartledge. I just want to pick directly up on what Deborah Hames was just saying there, saying that when it comes to the UK, our air defences, in her words, are woeful, which I guess sounds quite alarming when you look at the other countries who've relied on their air defences to repel missile attacks?
Well, I look back on my time as Defence Procurement Minister. We had a situation where ships in the Red Sea were under attack from drones, including our own destroyer HMS Diamond. It was attacked by a ballistic missile. It was able to intercept it. But crucially, what did we do about it? Well, we had this amazing technology that I procured called Dragonfire, which is a laser system to take down drones. Watching what had happened, I took the decision to massively accelerate that programme so that it could be on our ships by next year. We did that by removing layers of red tape that would have otherwise meant it took years to put in place. And that sort of technology is part of this. We also delivered something called SMASH, which you won't have heard of, to our soldiers, which is a special anti-drone gun sight. But on the key point of missile stocks, at the election, we had a plan for 10 billion of extra spending on munitions, a munitions strategy that I had written and included air defence, which Labour decided to put to one side and wait to have this very long strategic defence review, now defence investment plan, all delayed, no money in place for this. And the problem is, in my view, they've wasted months when they could have ordered some of those missiles.
Yeah, I mean, you just outlined there what a marvellous job you personally did when it comes to, getting the right weapons in place. But you'll acknowledge, though, as well, that this is like decades and decades of a lack of investment, right? Hollowing out, perhaps being a bit naive, that the world is going to be a more peaceful place than perhaps is the reality.
Well, I don't think we were naive when Putin invaded Ukraine, and we were the only country that... And by the way, wait a minute.
Enough about this, because I did let you have 2 minutes there just talking about... I let you have 2 minutes there talking about your great achievements, but I'm just talking there about the reality of yourselves and current governments and current politicians as well, of not getting to grips with the defence task that we see when we look at what's happening with the world.
So, by the way, they're great achievements of the defence industry and of people in the MOD as much as anyone else, quite frankly, and our personnel. But I think if you look at air defence, and I totally agree, I feel very strongly we need to do more for that. That's why we had our munition strategy in place. The key thing is we used to rely on the RAF, essentially. They are responsible for air defence for the UK, and the Typhoons will be very effective, but as Deborah said, it's an expensive way to intercept drones, Shaheeds, or whatever they may be. It depends on the capability. So capabilities change, and we've got to change with it. That's why, obviously, you asked what we did, I'm telling you what we did. Is that enough? We need to go further.
I didn't ask what you did, by the way. I said, is it right that we have a woeful defence in place? But anyway, that's by the by.
Well, tell me a country, the only other country that's got that sort of laser capability is Israel, as I'm aware. So it is a leading capability, but we need more of that, and it costs money, which is why, as Deborah has also said, and she's absolutely brilliant on this, they need to go to 3%, and tomorrow, Rachel Reeves needs to tell us that.
Can I ask what your view is on the government strategy when it comes to Iran, right? So at the beginning, they said, no, the US is not using our bases. They've now changed their mind on that. They say that, yes, the US can use our military bases because the legality is clear, it will be defensive. Did you agree broadly with the government's position on this or not?
Well, as Deborah said, it's a U-turn. I think it's an extraordinary position. Now, you might say that there are people who will take a position we shouldn't be involved. I've been very clear for weeks that if we were in government and the US asked our permission, we would have given them that permission if we'd hypothetically, been in government. But what they've got with the Prime Minister, as we saw last summer with the other bombing of nuclear facilities, is the worst of both worlds. Sitting on the fence, not showing strong leadership, very unclear. If I'm confused as to what his position is, I wonder what the public thinks, because what they want when they see the footage of, hotel rooms getting hit in Dubai and so on, they want to know they've got a strong government that's going to do the right thing, and it just isn't clear. The Prime Minister needs to be much clearer now about his position. My view is the nuclear programme of Iran is a profound threat to the world and to ourselves. A country which kills its own people, many thousands of them, should not get its hand on nuclear weapons. So we were very clear, we supported the US. I'm not sure what the Prime Minister's position is. Hopefully later today he'll tell Parliament.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, because Davey is saying that there should be a vote in Parliament about whether or not it's the right call to use these bases. Do you agree with that? Should there be a vote?
No, I don't. And the reason is, you've just spoken about the speed at which these missiles move. You can't have a parliamentary vote before you intercept an incoming missile. Your forces have to be able to do that. Now, obviously, there'll be those who say, on the overall programme, maybe there should be a vote. I think the key point is we need the Prime Minister in Parliament this afternoon. I hope it's him and he doesn't delegate to one of his ministers, explaining exactly what his position is. Because as far as I can see, it's clear as mud.
OK, great to have you on. Thank you very much. Indeed, James Cartledge there, the Shadow Defence Secretary.
Let's bring you back up to speed with some of the latest picture that we've been getting in from the region, and again play you this video of pilots ejecting from a US jet over Kuwait. We showed you the picture earlier of the plane that fell out of the sky, and from a distance you could see the ejections. Well, here is I guess, the landing following the ejections of the pilots. And we have been told that the pilots were unharmed. If that's the two pilots, one of them does look to be falling pretty quickly. But either way, extraordinary pictures, one of the many different moments of incredible video that's come out over the last few hours.
Yeah, it really is. Well, look, the ongoing situation in the Middle East has had a significant impact on the economy as well, and particularly on oil prices too. We've just got pictures in from, apologies, we go to Ed Conway next, our economics and data editor, to tell us a bit more on this. Look, we've been talking a lot about the military situation. Of course, the Brits abroad are going to be very, very concerned about that too. But this is going to have an impact on the world economy as well.
It does. I mean, you know, already you've seen oil prices go up. Maybe not as high as people might have expected. So, you know, up by about kind of 9% today. And I know, Wolf, you've been kind of showing those charts. I think a lot of people would have expected it to be a kind of, you know, a bigger immediate shock. Gold price is up a bit as well. So this, you know, whenever people are nervous, their money tends to go towards these kind of safe haven assets. The dollar, to some extent as well, it's kind of maybe playing a bit of that role. But I think, you know, a lot of traders out there and a lot of economists are just trying to take a step back and think about the deeper long-term implications here. I mean, you have... To start with the kind of immediate thing that most people are focused on, it is the fact that this is still, you know, we're talking about the Gulf here. We're talking about the Strait of Hormuz, which is where about, you know, a fifth of all of the world's oil and lots of the natural gas, including gas that we consume here in the UK, it goes through that strait. If that strait is going to be closed, and it's not closed at the moment, but you've got a lot of ships on either side of it waiting to see what's going to happen, waiting to see... there you can see the Strait of Hormuz, waiting to see whether they're going to be able to pass through there, waiting to see what the insurance implications are going to be. And all of this adds up to higher, I mean, just prosaically in the short run, that's higher inflation. So you've got higher oil prices, you've got higher costs of shipping. That means this is going to pass through and you're going to see that potentially passing into petrol prices and so on. But it's the deeper long-term consequences that I think is just so... It's so difficult to try and kind of map out the chess game here.
Just talk to us, Ed, about the importance of how long this goes on, because, as you said, 8% or so increase in oil price, not necessarily that much. We had a spike last summer when Donald Trump attacked or dropped bombs on Iran the first time, but it didn't last long. How long does it take to start to feed through to people here?
Oh, I mean, you know, with petrol prices, it's pretty quick. I mean, because you've got traders who are working in that house, and so you're talking about maybe a matter of weeks for petrol prices, sometimes even quicker. But then, by the same token, if the overall price goes down, but if Donald Trump is talking about this lasting for 4 or 5 weeks, and who knows whether that's an under kind of estimate or not, then this is big. And I think the thing that is maybe not imponderable, but just a big deal, which I think no one has yet kind of reckoned with, is what are the deeper economic consequences of when you have an area like the Gulf? OK, so you've got the energy story, and most people kind of intuitively understand, OK, that's pushing up oil prices, that's potentially going to push up gas prices. That is a big deal for all of us. It's also things like fertiliser prices. So a lot of fertiliser comes through the Straits of Hormuz to us in the UK. But also, Dubai and the UAE and Qatar have been increasingly playing this big role in the global economy recently as being this kind of entrepot. A lot of goods passing through there, a lot of people passing through there. A lot of people are going to be thinking twice about taking a flight that goes via the UAE in the future. That's a really big deal. This is the biggest, I think Dubai is the biggest airport in the world. And so what does that mean for the global economy in terms of people passing from one part of the world to another? What does it mean for goods that pass from one part of the world to another? Those at the moment are consequences, are kind of long-term, second-order, perhaps, things that people haven't really got their heads around yet, but they're starting to. And the fact that it's been quite a muted reaction initially doesn't necessarily mean that this is not going to have longer consequences on the way that we order the world. So it's kind of day one of market opening after what is potentially this seismic event in not just energy, but in the global economy. And we are just feeling our way through it at the moment. So I guess I'm not surprised that so far it hasn't been panic, but definitely this could have some big consequences. Yeah, and as you say, the fact that it's continuing, it's very difficult to predict where it's going to go. We've got pictures coming through now from Saudi Arabia. It's Ras Tanura oil refinery near Daman. They've had to shut it down. I mean, you can see why. Look at these pictures. It was targeted
by Iranian drones, Saudi state television, reporting a official source there.
So that, if I remember rightly, that is the refinery that deals with the Ghawar field, which is the single biggest oil field in Saudi, which is, you know, aside from the US, it is the single biggest producer of oil in the world.
500,000 barrels of crude oil a day in that refinery.
And if you think about it, so that oil, you know, what you're seeing there is, you know, that's the refinery. There is also a kind of port very nearby there, out of which that's where the tankers load all of their oil. They have to. The issue with the Strait of Hormuz, you know, we showed you that map a moment ago. The issue with that is there's only one way out. I mean, there is a pipeline, so you can get some of the oil across Saudi and get it towards the Red Sea. Again, it's not that straightforward getting through out of the Red Sea, at least in the south. But you know, there is really only one way out in terms of shipping out of Saudi. And what you're looking at there is one of the facilities that is kind of producing a lot of the fuels that are kind of come from oil. So even though we're not living in the 1970s anymore, where one of these shocks can, you know, have such a big consequence, this is still the foundation for so much of, you know, modern civilization, even today.
Ed, as always, great stuff. Thanks so much.
Well, there's a lot of political reaction going on, of course, to what is happening. Joining us now is the Green Party MP, Dr. Ellie Chan. She's also leader of the Green Group in the House of Commons. Great to have you with us. Thanks for being with us. Is the world a safer place now the Ayatollah has been killed?
I don't think the world is a safer place as a result of the Israeli and US action on Saturday. What we're seeing is the development of a regional war. It's an incredibly unstable situation. On Friday, there was a diplomatic process in place. And of course, you know, getting rid of the Ayatollah is something that nobody is going to be mourning. He was the leader of a...
happy to see that?
It's not about celebration. What I'm keen to see is democracy and peace in Iran. I've been very outspoken in critiquing the Iranian regime. And so, no, I do not mourn the deaths of the leaders of that abhorrent, brutal, cruel regime. But I do not think that the illegal action of the US and Israeli governments at the weekend makes the world a safer place. I think it makes us all less safe.
I was really struck by an interview we did earlier on the programme with an Iranian who said that she was celebrating the death of the Ayatollah and that a lot of people in Iran would be as well. I guess the question is, you're obviously deeply worried about the reactions. I know many of our viewers will be as well. But if this hadn't happened, what would you have liked to have seen? What would the alternative have been?
Well, there was an alternative happening. That was the diplomatic process, the negotiations to defuse any nuclear threat from Iran. You know, peace is not secured through unilateral or bilateral airstrikes. It's not even clear what the aims of the US and Israel are here. And just to be clear here, what we've seen here is the action of an Israeli government led by a man who is himself a war criminal responsible for a genocide, and a US government led by a man who is obviously a total loose cannon with no clarity about what the strategic aims are. And the risk is that the UK is going to be drawn into this.
I want to pick you up on that point because I think it's an important one. But just finally, on the Iranian people, which I do want to just finish this section because I think it's important. You know, you said that there was a process in place, but I guess the brutality was, you know, you had Iranian people taking to the streets to protest against the regime and being killed, being gunned down. And I guess the difficulty is, you know, that's the thing with dictators. The more people they kill, the safer they are, because eventually people will stop going on the streets, right?
But there is no guarantee. Indeed, there is huge amount of uncertainty and great unlikelihood that the actions that the US and Israel have taken will make things better for the Iranians. And all we have to look at is the example of Iraq more than 20 years ago, quite a significant parallel. And what that led to was so many years of huge damage and destruction and huge loss of life.
Keir Starmer has now allowed defensive strikes from UK air bases. Was that the right decision?
I don't think so, no, because it draws the UK into what risks becoming an incredibly unstable situation and indeed a regional war. Now, the justification that has been provided is pretty hair-splitting, to be perfectly honest. There is no guarantee whatsoever that the US will not use UK bases for aggressive actions. And indeed, arguably, any action that the US is taking in this context is by definition aggressive because, of course, there is no legal justification for the action that they took in initiating the bombing of Iran.
I just want to talk to you about one other thing. So this is images that came on social media, video on social media about the deputy leader of the Green Party, Mohsen Ali, appearing to show him at a pro-Iran protest at the weekend. Now, I haven't got the full details of that, right? What I can say is in the video, slogans nearby him in the same footage, we must globalise our resistance to US and Zionist terrorism, pedo hands off Iran. Can you just clear up, A, was he there? And B, what was the protest? Why was he there?
My understanding is that Mohsen attended an anti-war protest. Mohsen is anti-war. He believes that peace can only be secured through peaceful means. He believes in diplomacy. He believes in seeking peace in the Middle East. And that is the position of the Green Party. You know, we are absolutely clear that the actions that have been taken by the US and Israeli government at the weekend are not making the world a safer place. They're making it more dangerous, they're generating instability, and they are illegal. So my understanding is that Mohsen was at a protest protesting against that illegal war.
So Tom Tugendhat, the Conservative MP, in response to that image of Mohsen Ali at this protest, said, the Green Party stands with those who murder young Iranians seeking a better life and freedom. The deputy leader stands with those who murder gay and lesbian men and women by hanging them from cranes. It comes to something when hatred of your own country leads you to side with such evil.
Well, that's completely outrageous slander and complete misinformation. You know, I have been outspoken, Mohsen has been outspoken, my party has been outspoken against violence, against repression, against the repression in Iran perpetuated by the regime. I've spoken multiple times in Parliament just in the last few weeks about that and in support of the brave Iranian people, the citizens who have been coming out to try to seek peace. But I am absolutely not convinced that the actions taken by Israel and the US at the weekend will make peace more likely. I think they make things more dangerous in Iran and in the region and for the world more widely. And the UK should be using all of its diplomatic levers to exert power on the US to stop, to step back from the brink, to de-escalate, to return to diplomacy as the mechanism for securing peace, not just in Iran, but in the wider Middle East.
Ali Charles, thank you very much indeed. Green Party giving their view there.
Let's get the perspective now of Nicholas Hopton, who's the former UK ambassador to Iran. He's now Director General of the Middle East Association and joins me now. Very good morning to you, Nicholas. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
I guess I'll start with the similar question to how Sophie started there with the Greens. Is the world a better place without Ayatollah Khamenei in it?
Undoubtedly. This is a very despotic, evil man, and I think the term can be used advisedly. He's responsible for the deaths of many of his own citizens and people abroad as well. He has led a regime which has sponsored international terrorism and proxy groups which have inflicted huge cost on not only the countries in the region, the peoples of the region and his own country, but also further afield and in Europe and obviously beyond.
Are we, though, in a moment of enormous uncertainty and potential instability?
This is a great moment of peril. I think that the next 24 hours perhaps could be even more important for what the President of the United States decides to do than what he's decided to do in the last 2.5, 3 days. He has an opportunity to choose at this point, President Trump, before the escalation of the conflict becomes greater and the cost to not only the regime in Iran, which many, including myself, would like to see replaced by something much better for the Iranian people. But he has a choice on how to achieve that. And the choices are pretty stark, really. He can either declare victory, having decapitated the Iranian regime, and, as he said last night, try and engage in some sort of meaningful talks, diplomacy, and get the kind of deal that he wants on his terms, because he's in a position of strength at the moment as the US, supported by his allies. And that off-ramp is there for him to take. The alternative is likely to be escalation and further bloodshed without a clear outcome, either for the people in Iran or in the region.
The first option, would it be, or what are the chances of him using the off-ramp and declaring victory? What are the chances that it would be a genuine victory, that we would see the regime replaced or filled in by someone that would be less evil and despotic? I think those are your words at the start as to the prior leader.
I think the chance, it is a gamble. The whole thing has been a gamble. But the initial signs since the death of Khamenei have been that there are people within the regime who are looking to change perhaps the regime from within. I think the nomination of Alireza Arefi as the head of this three-person body who will choose the next supreme leader, which is catered for under the Iranian Constitution, Article 111, that's an interesting position they've put him in, because this is an Ayatollah who was, of course, very close to the past supreme leader, Khamenei, but perhaps slightly more conciliatory figure. Even though obviously a member of the regime, he's not a great political or security figure. He heads up the seminary system in Iran, the teaching of young Iranian clerics. And interestingly, he met the Pope in 2022. So this is a man who can engage and understand the West to a greater degree. I don't want to be over-optimistic, but this might be seen and interpreted, if the US wants to do that, as a conciliatory move.
If that off-ramp is to be taken, does it need to be taken in the next day or two?
I think so. I think, as we've seen this morning already, the escalation, the spreading of the conflict is rapid. More and more countries are being drawn into it. You saw this morning, Lebanon is now part of this conflict. It is becoming a war, and we know what happens when wars escalate in that region without a clear plan for the day after, and I'm afraid to say it's not yet clear if the United States has a clear plan for the day after.
What about the Iranian response? Have you been surprised by how broad it's been? The number of countries that have been targeted, or at least foreign bases in those countries have been targeted?
Well, it's certainly very different from June last year, the 12-day war with Israel, which was much more narrow in focus, including from the Iranian retaliation on Israel. I think this time round they've clearly learned from that experience and decided to, one, decentralise their military structures. So these missiles and drones are being fired from all over the country. And it's not a central command structure in the way, I don't think, as perhaps in the past. This makes it much more difficult to wipe it out, of course. And at the same time, they've clearly taken a strategic decision, or at least tactical, to make the countries allied with the United States pay a price in the hope that that will bring pressure on Washington to bring the fighting to an end as soon as possible and get back to the negotiating table.
Stepping back from it all, how impressed or surprised were you by the US attack? I guess maybe you got to the point of expecting that something was coming. The scale of it, the fact that the Ayatollah was eliminated, was this a surprise to you?
I think it was effective. I think the fact that they got to Khamenei so quickly is impressive in terms of projection of military force. Clearly, in retrospect, I suspect that the whole decision to go ahead was dependent on the fact that they suddenly knew where the Supreme Leader was and they could get to him. The US and Israeli attack missiles and planes. So I think that was a decisive moment. Yes, it's been impressive, but what will be much more impressive is if the United States can now capitalise on its huge advantage, both military, political and diplomatic, and turn that into a meaningful victory which brings a better future for the Iranian people and everyone in the region.
Are you optimistic that that's possible?
It's always a mistake to be optimistic in the Middle East, is something I've learnt over my career as a diplomat. However, I think it is possible to achieve better outcomes than the ones we've got at the moment. And certainly the people of Iran have been subject to huge oppression. Most recently in January, thousands, if not tens of thousands of innocent protesters have been massacred. They deserve a better future. I think if this present moment of great peril is handled correctly by the President of the United States, and it does come down largely to his decisions, a better future for the region, a more stable region, and a better future for the world generally is possible.
Nicholas Hopton, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your perspective, former ambassador, of course, to Iran, 2016 to 2018.
We'll continue our coverage on Iran. Our presenter Yad Hakim has been speaking to the Iranian ambassador to the UK. She asked him if Iranian attacks on other Gulf countries will continue.
You see, first of all, let me reiterate that we have a very friendly and brotherly relations with our neighbors in the Persian Gulf, all of them, with the UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, all of them. And so we had a very good relations with them. And before this imposed war, we have declared to the American side and as well as our neighbors that if they want to impose any war and military aggression against Iran, there is no doubt that Iran will consider to have some reaction according to our self-defense right.
Well, let's bring in Yalda, who's able to join us from Jerusalem. Yalda, great to have you with us. In terms of your assessment of where we are, and this was really interesting talking to Nicholas Hopton there, the former ambassador to Iran, that I thought sensed the first sort of slight optimism that there could be an off-ramp in the days ahead, albeit, I guess, not his base case. What's your latest assessment of where we are?
Well, you know, when you think about the off-ramp, we thought we saw one last night when President Trump told American reporters in a series of interviews he did that the Iranian leaders, the current Iranian leaders, had reached out to him and wanted to talk. Today, we've heard from some of those leaders in Iran who have made it clear that they won't be talking to the United States. So there is a lot of uncertainty, deep uncertainty at the moment in this region, certainly about what's going to happen in Iran next. Donald Trump on Saturday told the Iranian people, we are here with you. He reiterated that yesterday in his statements. He said, we are going to do the aerial bombardment. It's up to you then to go out onto the streets and reclaim your country, reclaim the government. But you are asking millions of people who are wary after what happened in January following those protests, that they can come out onto the streets and take on those with the guns. Now, at the moment, we've seen the Supreme Leader killed, at least 48 or 49 senior leaders from the regime killed. That doesn't mean that this regime has collapsed. We're still seeing the security apparatus, even though they're being targeted, thousands of their sites being targeted by Israel and the United States functioning. Over the weekend, we saw some celebrations and mourners come out as well. So it gives you a sense of just how divided this nation of 92 million people is. So the idea that this could be a quick fix, that there would be aerial campaign that would take place over 3 or 4 weeks, and then eventually that would bring the regime to its knees and people would be able to come out and reclaim their country, I think is still too optimistic in these early stages. We're day 3 of this war. We're seeing other countries in the region being dragged into this. You saw those images of luxury hotels being targeted with drones, missiles flying over the Gulf states. These are countries that pride themselves on safety and security. Suddenly, they woke up on Saturday and found themselves in the middle of this conflict. They were angry at the United States and Israel, the residents of these countries. By Saturday night, they were angry at Iran. So Iran making a calculus that somehow these Gulf states are going to then turn to Donald Trump and the Israelis and say, you have to stop because they are hitting our civilian targets, and maybe energy infrastructure could be hit as well, which would impact the global economy. These are all risks that, frankly, all sides are currently taking.
Yada, it's such an important, I guess, reality check on where we are with the conflict. I guess the other thing as well is that a lot of people here asking, what next? You know, if you enter a conflict, you've always got to think, how is this going to end? And I was so struck by Donald Trump talking about, you know, who could follow potentially. It's not going to be anybody that we were thinking of because they're all dead. Second or third place is dead. What's your assessment on what could be next?
You know, Sophie, General Petraeus, who is the four-star American general who led forces in Afghanistan, who led the surge in Iraq, often says, tell me how this ends. And that is the big question here. An aerial campaign cannot bring about regime change. So there are a few questions here about what next for Iran and the region. The question is, what will these protesters, these people who are against this regime, do next? Will they be able to come out onto the streets? When they did come out at the weekend, the Basij, the militia force of the Revolutionary Guard, there's 1 million of them, they came out onto the streets and ensured that people went back into their homes. You know, we cannot forget what happened on January 8 and 9, when they frankly killed thousands of protesters. So in wartime, are they going to be even more brutal? And as many Iranians as may come out onto the streets, you know, there are millions of the security apparatus that could come out, and they have the guns in their hands. The next question is, will the regime be able to survive this? You know, this is a incredibly complex regime in terms of how many layers they have and how they operate. We know that a temporary leadership council has been put in place. Are they able to survive this moment? And the third thing is, will there be a sort of power struggle from within? So there are still big questions about what happens next, Sophie.
Yalda, thanks so much. We really do appreciate it. Of course, much more coverage to come from Yalda and the whole team across the region in the day ahead. We'll continue to have everything on the developing situation in the Middle East for you. Don't go anywhere. Sky News Today back after this.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.